Elon Musk stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. He adjusted the baseball cap on his head, pulled the hoodie over his shoulders, and glanced one last time at his disguise. The sunglasses hid most of his face, and the casual outfit should help him blend in with the crowd. Yet, deep down, he felt a strange sense of excitement mixed with apprehension. This wasn't something he had ever done before. As the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, the world constantly watched his every move. It felt like every action, every statement, every public appearance was scrutinized. The fame was overwhelming at times. People often saw him as a larger-than-life figure, someone who could do no wrong or, on the flip side, someone who was too eccentric to be understood. But beneath all the innovation and the business empires, Elon was, at his core, just a man. A man who longed for the simplest experiences in life. One of those experiences? To walk into a restaurant and simply be a customer. To not be greeted with Mr. Musk, or have every conversation turn into an inquiry about his companies or his ambitions. Just to be a regular person, sitting down for a meal like anyone else. He had come to the conclusion that the only way to do this without attracting unwanted attention was to go undercover. The idea had crossed his mind many times over the years. He had always dismissed it, thinking it might be too risky or even foolish. But today, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, he felt a strange urge. It was time to see how the world viewed him when they didn't know who he was. Elon had picked one of his own restaurants to test this theory. A small, unassuming place that had garnered some local attention for its innovative food menu. It was one of those hidden gems, tucked away in a corner of the city, where people came for the food, not the fame. Musk had never actually dined there before, but he had heard rave reviews from his employees and thought it was the perfect place to test his theory. As he left his house and slid into the driver's seat of his car, a rush of anticipation ran through him. He had no idea what to expect. Would people recognize him immediately? Would he be able to blend in? Or would this entire plan be a total failure? As he drove, his mind wandered. It was hard to escape the constant hum of thoughts about his companies. Tesla was on the verge of launching a new car model. SpaceX had just completed another successful launch, and there were always talks of future plans and innovations. But today, he wasn't thinking about rockets or electric vehicles. Today, he just wanted to experience life from a different perspective. When Elon arrived at the restaurant, he parked in the farthest spot from the door, just in case. He wanted to make sure no one would catch a glimpse of him before he was fully inside. As he approached the entrance, he adjusted his cap one more time, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The moment he stepped inside, the bustling energy of the restaurant enveloped him. The sounds of chatter, clinking glasses, and sizzling pans filled the air. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, with rustic decor and soft lighting that created a cozy ambience. Musk was immediately struck by how different this place was from the usual high-end restaurants he frequented. There were no flashing lights or extravagant displays of wealth, just a humble, comfortable space where people came to enjoy a meal. He stood at the entrance for a moment, scanning the room. There was a line at the counter, and a few patrons sat at tables, enjoying their food. No one seemed to recognize him, which was both reassuring and slightly disappointing. It was strange, being anonymous like this. After a few seconds of deliberation, Elon joined the line. He wasn't sure how long he would be able to keep up this charade, but for now, he was content to just go through the motions like everyone else. He couldn't remember the last time he'd stood in a line without someone approaching him, asking for an autograph or discussing one of his many ventures. The cashier, a young woman with a friendly smile, greeted him as he approached the counter. "Hi there. What can I get you today?" Musk took a moment to glance at the menu above her head, trying to act like he hadn't already made up his mind. He wasn't sure if it was the excitement of the situation or just the fact that he was finally in a place where no one recognized him, but he felt oddly calm. It was a sensation he hadn't experienced in a long time. "I'll take the special of the day," he said, his voice slightly strained from trying to sound like a normal customer. The cashier nodded and punched the order into the register. "Great choice. That'll be $18.50. Elon handed her the cash and waited for his change. As he did, he couldn't help but notice the people around him. Most of them were completely oblivious to who he was, which made him smile inwardly. It was refreshing to be just another face in the crowd. His food was ready quickly, and the cashier handed him the plate with a polite smile. Elon took it and walked to an empty table by the window, hoping to enjoy his meal in peace. As he settled into the seat, a strange sensation washed over him. He wasn't just experiencing normalcy. He was actively hiding from the very thing that had shaped his entire life. The restaurant wasn't busy, but there was a comfortable buzz in the air, and as he sat down, he realized that this was the first time in ages that he didn't feel like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He could just exist here, in this moment. No meetings, no deadlines, no expectations. Just him, a plate of food, and the simple pleasure of enjoying a meal. But just as he was about to take the first bite, he heard a voice behind him. Two boys were talking quietly, almost as if they didn't realize he could hear them. "I heard Elon Musk eats here sometimes," one of the boys whispered. Elon froze. He hadn't been recognized yet. Had he? He wasn't sure if he should turn around or just act like he hadn't heard. The idea of being caught in his own little undercover experiment sent a ripple of anxiety through him. What if they figured it out? "I wonder if he ever comes here undercover," the other boy mused. "Like, maybe he's just trying to see what it's really like to be a regular person." Elon's heart skipped a beat. The boys were talking about him, and they hadn't even realized it. In that moment, he couldn't help but chuckle to himself. This was too much. It was surreal. And yet, it was exactly what he had come here for. A glimpse of what it was like to be just another person in the crowd. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the boys continued talking behind him, Elon's mind raced. He was torn between revealing himself and keeping up the ruse. The impulse to turn around and say something witty, perhaps make a joke about how it wasn't often he got to sneak into his own restaurant, was strong. But then, something stopped him. A feeling, something deeper than the fear of being recognized, held him back. It was the odd comfort of being ordinary, something he hadn't truly felt in years. Elon had spent the last decade of his life building massive companies, solving problems no one else dared to tackle. From electric cars to space travel, his name had become synonymous with technological innovation and wealth beyond measure. Yet, as time passed, he found himself becoming more isolated. It was as if every new achievement added another layer between him and the world he once knew. For as long as he could remember, Elon had been obsessed with pushing boundaries. First, it was his desire to escape the status quo in business, to redefine what was possible. Then, it was the relentless drive to colonize Mars, to make humanity a multi-planetary species. But at what cost? His childhood was far from ordinary. Raised in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon had always been a dreamer, always someone who wanted more. But there was also a sense of loneliness, a feeling of being different. He wasn't the typical kid, and he never quite fit in. Whether it was because he was endlessly reading books or tinkering with computers, there was a barrier between him and other kids. His parents divorced when he was young, and Elon's relationship with his father was strained. His father had always been critical, pushing Elon to do more, be more, even though the constant pressure sometimes made him feel inadequate. His mother, on the other hand, was always supportive, though a little distant. She was a model for Elon's ambition, a woman who believed in herself and who encouraged her children to chase their dreams. But the truth was, the more Elon achieved, the more distant he became from his past, from his roots. The things he did with Tesla, SpaceX, and now even the Boring Company, these were his life's purpose. He was changing the world, sure, but in doing so, he found himself more disconnected from the simple things that once brought him joy. Hanging out with friends, sitting down for a meal without being recognized, taking a walk without being followed by cameras. It had been years since he'd done something as simple as walking into a restaurant and just being a customer, a man who could disappear into the crowd. Today, he had hoped that he could feel that again. But the moment he heard the boys talk about him, that dream came crashing down. Even here, even now, he wasn't truly anonymous. As the minutes passed, Musk sat silently at the table, pushing his food around on the plate without really eating. His thoughts lingered on the boys behind him. They weren't just talking about the latest Tesla release or the fact that SpaceX had just launched another successful mission to the International Space Station. They were talking about him as a person, an ordinary person, a regular customer. The boys, not knowing that the very person they were discussing sat right in front of them, had unwittingly captured the essence of what he wanted most. He wasn't just Elon Musk, the billionaire innovator. He was a man who longed to be seen as normal. With that realization, he felt a pang of longing for the life he used to have. There was a time when he didn't have to hide, when he didn't have to worry about people gawking at him in public or asking for his autograph, when he could just be. And he wondered, for the first time in a long time, if it was possible to reclaim that life. But could he? Could he really go back to being someone who wasn't recognized everywhere he went? Was it possible to have a life like the one he once dreamed of, where he could walk into a room and no one knew who he was? As these thoughts swirled in his mind, the boys' voices began to fade as the din of the restaurant took over. Elon refocused on his meal, picking up his fork. The food, which had once seemed so promising, now tasted bland in his mouth. He wasn't hungry anymore, not in the way he used to be. This wasn't just about food. It was about connection, and that was something he hadn't felt in a long time. The longer he sat there, the more he realized how much he missed this, just existing. He was a tech mogul, a visionary, a billionaire, but deep down, he longed for the simplicity of life before the fame, before the constant pressure to innovate, to outdo himself with every new project. He could feel it, the longing to be part of something more grounded, more real. For a brief moment, he wondered if the boy's innocent curiosity about his life was a kind of reflection of his own journey. They were talking about him as if he were a mystery, someone larger than life, someone they wanted to understand. But what if he could be someone who didn't need to be explained? Someone who wasn't under a magnifying glass all the time? Elon was shaken from his thoughts by a light tap on his shoulder. He turned quickly, startled. "Excuse me, sir," a voice said. You're Elon Musk, right?" His heart sank. The moment was over. His experiment in normalcy had lasted mere minutes. But instead of feeling irritated or frustrated, Elon smiled. The voice was polite, even excited, but there was no judgment in it. The young man standing in front of him looked nervous, but genuinely curious, as if he couldn't quite believe he was speaking to the person everyone talked about. "Yes," Elon said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I am." The young man's eyes widened in disbelief. I'm a huge fan. I've followed your work for years. You've done so much, and it's just incredible. I'm actually here with my buddy. He's going to lose his mind when I tell him I met you." Elon chuckled, amused by the young man's enthusiasm. "Well, I'm just a guy, trying to get some lunch," he replied, hoping to downplay the situation. The young man, still stunned, nodded enthusiastically, clearly not knowing how to continue. "You know," he added, "you've made such a huge impact on everything. Space travel, electric cars, even the boring tunnel thing. It's crazy. It's like you're trying to change the world." Elon smiled, appreciating the sincerity of the comment. "I'm trying my best. Is there any chance you'd give a few words to my friend?" the young man asked, gesturing behind him. Elon hesitated for a moment. Part of him wanted to just eat his meal and continue his quiet day, but another part of him, perhaps the part that had longed for connection, wanted to give this moment some meaning. "Sure," Elon said, his voice warm. "Tell your friend to come on over. I've got a few minutes." As the young man ran to fetch his friend, Elon thought about how strange it was that even in this moment, when he wanted so badly to be ordinary, he was still shaping the world. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly where he belonged. In the spotlight, yes, but in a way that allowed him to share, to teach, and to connect. For the first time in a long while, Elon felt something new. A sense of purpose, not just in the work he was doing, but in the lives he could touch by simply being present. Elon sat back in his chair, trying to steady his breath as the young man, still filled with nervous energy, returned with his friend. As the second boy approached, Elon could see that he was around the same age. Late teens, early 20s, and his eyes lit up when he saw Elon sitting there, casual and unassuming. Not the tech mogul everyone knew, but a man simply trying to enjoy a meal. The friend walked over, his mouth hanging slightly open in shock. "No way. Are you really him?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. Elon smiled gently, nodding. "I'm really him." There was a brief pause as the two boys exchanged looks, clearly trying to process the surreal moment. The first boy, who had spoken to Elon first, then grinned widely. "I can't believe this. What are the chances? We're just here having lunch, and we run into you. You've completely changed how we see the future of technology, electric cars, Mars, and everything. This is insane." Elon could see the genuine awe in their eyes, the same excitement he'd seen in so many faces throughout his career. It was a look that had always motivated him, a reminder of why he did what he did. But at this moment, it felt different. He wasn't in his usual suit, standing in front of a crowd at a conference or an event. He wasn't making the usual grand promises about how he would change the world. Here, in the quiet corner of a small restaurant, he was just a guy. A guy who could take a break from the weight of his world and just be present. "I'm glad you're excited," Elon replied, his voice warm. "But just so you know, I'm just a guy trying to make things better. It's not about being perfect, it's about the effort." The second boy, still trying to wrap his head around the situation, laughed nervously. "Yeah, but still, I mean, you've done what people thought was impossible. I remember when people said electric cars would never work. You proved them all wrong." Elon chuckled softly. "Well, a lot of it is about persistence. It's about believing in the impossible and sticking with it, even when people tell you it can't be done." The boys were hanging on every word, their gazes intense. Elon knew they were hoping for some grand piece of advice, something that would give them direction in their own lives. But at that moment, he realized how much he himself needed to hear the words that had come from his own mouth. The idea of persistence, of believing in the impossible. It was a mantra that had carried him through countless obstacles, but now, as he sat there, he realized just how much he'd been pushing himself for years without stopping to enjoy the ride. They were still staring at him, waiting for more. Elon could feel the weight of their expectations, and for a brief moment, he considered telling them the truth, that he had no idea what he was doing half the time, that it was a constant battle of trial and error. But he wasn't sure if they would understand that. Instead, he simply smiled again. "You know, you guys remind me of myself when I was your age. Full of ambition, wanting to change the world. And that's a good thing, because without that kind of drive, we wouldn't get anywhere." The first boy nodded. "So, what's next for you? I mean, you're always coming up with something new, right? What's the next big thing?" Elon paused. What was next? That question had followed him everywhere for years. What was the next frontier? What was the next big project that would change everything? Sometimes, it felt like there was always something. Tesla's electric vehicles were pushing the envelope. SpaceX was aiming for Mars. Neuralink was attempting to connect the human brain to machines. The work was never-ending. But, in this moment, sitting here in this humble restaurant, surrounded by young faces eager to be inspired, he felt an unusual sense of calm. Maybe the next big thing wasn't some groundbreaking technological marvel. Maybe, just maybe, the next big thing was a simpler, quieter approach to life. Maybe the next step for him wasn't about taking on the world, but about connecting more deeply with people in the world around him. "Well," he said, considering his words carefully, "I think the next big thing is going to involve us learning how to live together on this planet more sustainably. We've got a lot of work to do to make sure we take care of Earth before we move on to other planets. We can't forget about our home." The boys looked thoughtful, nodding slowly. For a moment, the excitement seemed to shift to something more grounded. They weren't asking about the flashy headlines or the shiny new toys. They were asking about the bigger picture, the long-term impact. It was a conversation that felt more real than most others he had been a part of. The second boy suddenly looked concerned. "But don't you get overwhelmed sometimes? I mean, you've got all this pressure on you. You've got to be perfect, right?" Elon chuckled softly at the idea of perfection. "No, I'm definitely not perfect," he said with a smile. "I fail all the time. But I think it's about learning from the mistakes, pushing through when things get tough. You don't get the big breakthroughs without the failures. But how do you keep going? The first boy asked. That's the hard part, Elon admitted. Sometimes, you have to take a step back and let yourself rest. Recharge. But most importantly, you have to believe in what you're doing. You have to know that what you're working on is going to make a difference in the long run. The boys were silent for a moment, processing what Elon had said. Elon, for his part, was realizing that this was exactly what he needed to hear. That small spark of reassurance that no matter how difficult things got, his purpose, his mission, was still valid. He wasn't just changing the world because of his ideas, but because of the people he could inspire. Elon stood up and looked down at the two young men. They were still staring at him, their eyes wide with admiration and wonder. You guys have a bright future ahead of you, Elon said. Just don't forget to take the time to enjoy the journey. It's not all about the destination. With that, he turned to walk away, his heart a little lighter than it had been when he walked in. It wasn't just about giving advice or meeting fans. It was about reconnecting with a piece of himself he had lost somewhere along the way. The simple joy of a conversation, the connection that wasn't about his companies or his success, but about people being people. As Elon walked to the exit, the boys' voices followed him, calling out a final, "Thank you." He smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. For a moment, he was just a guy. No more, no less, walking out of a restaurant. And in that moment, that was exactly what he needed to be. Elon Musk left the restaurant, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. The brief interaction with the two young men had felt different from anything he was used to. There was no awe, no idolization, just a raw, honest conversation between two people who saw each other as equals. It was refreshing, almost like breathing fresh air after being trapped in a stuffy room for too long. But as he walked toward his car, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The weight of his reputation, always looming behind him like an invisible wall, felt less oppressive. For the first time in years, he had experienced something that didn't feel manufactured or performance-driven. He was just himself. Elon reached his car and paused for a moment, staring at his reflection in the tinted windows. Who was he really? The Elon Musk everyone knew? The billionaire with all the answers? The visionary with his eyes set on Mars? Or was he someone else entirely? Someone who just wanted to be heard, to be seen as a regular person, to experience life without the constant pressure of being Elon Musk? As he drove back to his mansion, the familiar hum of the car's engine brought him some comfort. The world outside was always moving, but inside his car, he had a rare moment of solitude. The road ahead stretched endlessly in front of him, much like the future that lay before him in his career. There were still projects to complete, innovations to create, and challenges to overcome. But in the back of his mind, he kept thinking about those two boys, their simple questions, their genuine curiosity. He realized that he had been so consumed with changing the world that he had forgotten to connect with it. He was always so focused on the bigger picture, on the next great technological advancement, that he had neglected the small moments that made life truly meaningful. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how much he had missed out on in his quest for perfection. He'd spent so many years pursuing success that he had failed to acknowledge the value of those fleeting, ordinary moments, the ones that made life worth living. Maybe the key to moving forward wasn't just about being a step ahead in technology or business. Maybe it was about reconnecting with the very people he was trying to help. Later that night, as Elon sat in the living room of his mansion, the noise of the world outside seemed to fade into the background. He pulled out his phone and stared at it for a moment, thinking about what he should do next. He could call his team, his engineers, his SpaceX crew, but instead, he opened his social media app and scrolled through a few messages. For the first time in a while, he didn't feel the need to respond to every comment or tweet. Instead, he thought back to the boys at the restaurant. He realized that it wasn't the accolades or the praise he craved. It was the connection, the human aspect of it. He could make all the groundbreaking innovations he wanted, but none of it would matter if he couldn't engage with the world around him in a real way. Maybe I need to find a new perspective, Elon whispered to himself, more to feel the weight of the words than to actually say them aloud. As if on cue, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from his assistant, Claire. Meeting with the team tomorrow at 10 a.m., don't forget. Elon smiled to himself. Even the simplest things in his life, like keeping up with meetings, felt like they were pulling him back into the routine he had come to know so well. But for once, he didn't feel frustrated by the constant whirlwind of activity. Instead, it felt like a reminder that there was more to his world than just the work. It was a way to stay grounded, to stay connected with the people who relied on him. The next morning, Elon arrived at the office, ready to dive into the day's work. The team was already gathered around a large conference table when he walked in. His engineers, designers, and strategists all greeted him, but there was one person missing, the young intern who had started only a few weeks earlier. "Where's Derek?" Elon asked, glancing around the room. "Oh, he's in the back," said one of the senior engineers. "He's been working on a new prototype for the next generation battery. I'll grab him." As the engineer left to fetch Derek, Elon settled into his usual spot at the head of the table. He could feel the weight of the conversation start to build, the usual topics of innovation, progress, and deadlines. But for the first time, he found himself slightly detached from it all. The usual fervor, the constant pressure to push forward, didn't seem as urgent as it once had. Instead, his mind kept drifting back to the restaurant, to the young faces full of curiosity, and to the idea that maybe, just maybe, he was missing out on something. Derek entered the room just as the meeting was about to begin. He was young, eager, and still carrying the fresh optimism of someone new to the field. He greeted Elon with a nervous smile, clearly still in awe of the fact that he was working so closely with the man who had helped shape the future of technology. "Hey, Derek," Elon said casually, offering him a seat. "How's the prototype coming along?" Derek sat down and nodded enthusiastically. "It's going really well. I think we're about to crack the next big leap in battery efficiency. If we get it right, it could double the lifespan of our current models." Elon's mind briefly flickered with excitement. This was the kind of progress he lived for. But then, for some reason, his attention shifted again. He looked at Derek and saw the same excitement in his eyes that the two boys at the restaurant had shown. It was raw, unfiltered passion for the work, a reminder of why he had started this journey in the first place. "Good," Elon said. "But remember, it's not just about the technology. It's about the impact we can make on the world. We need to make sure that what we're building doesn't just change the way people drive or use energy. It needs to change their lives." Derek looked at him with a newfound understanding, as if the words struck a chord deep inside him. "I get it," Derek said quietly. "We're not just building products. We're building a future." Elon nodded. "Exactly. It's easy to get lost in the details, but we have to keep the bigger picture in mind. We're not just working on tech. We're working on something that could affect generations to come." As the meeting continued, Elon felt the connection he had been searching for. An unspoken bond with his team, with the people around him who shared his vision. They weren't just working for him. They were working with him, striving for something bigger. In the back of his mind, Elon realized that perhaps the real breakthrough wasn't just in technology. Perhaps it was in how he chose to lead, how he chose to connect with the people who believed in him, not as a figurehead, but as a fellow traveler on the same path. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to find the balance between pushing the boundaries of technology and reconnecting with the humanity behind it all. Elon Musk had spent the last several days reflecting on his personal journey, especially after that unexpected interaction with the two young boys at the restaurant. His heart had lightened, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. While he was surrounded by brilliant people and groundbreaking projects, he had become too distant from the everyday world. In many ways, he had become a figurehead, a symbol of success rather than a person others could relate to. His mind kept drifting back to the conversation with the two boys. They were fresh, excited, curious, not clouded by the media frenzy or expectations surrounding his name. For a brief moment, they had seen him not as Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur, but as a regular person. It was an experience he hadn't realized he'd been craving for so long. As he lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, a thought struck him. What if he could reconnect with the world in a more authentic way? Not as the public persona he had spent years cultivating, but as himself, someone who could relate to the struggles and challenges that everyday people faced. What if he could go undercover in his own life, truly experience the world from the perspective of an average person? It wasn't the first time he'd considered this idea, but tonight, it felt different. He needed to do it. He needed to step out of the bubble of his wealth and fame and see the world as it really was, without the filters of luxury or privilege. It was time to step away from the boardrooms, the press conferences, and the product launches, and experience life from a fresh perspective. The next morning, Elon called his assistant, Claire. "Claire," he began, his voice steady but tinged with a sense of excitement. "I need you to arrange something for me. I want to go undercover. I want to experience the world the way an average person does." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Claire was no stranger to Elon's eccentricities, but this was different. "Undercover? You mean like, as a regular person?" "Exactly," Elon replied. "I want to go to one of my own restaurants, blend in, and see how the staff, the customers, and even the food really feel. I want to see how things operate when I'm not the boss walking through the door. I need to know what it's really like." Claire, ever the professional, processed the request. "Okay, I'll arrange it, but you'll need to disguise yourself, of course. You can't exactly show up in your usual attire." Elon grinned. "I'll figure something out. Just make sure the restaurant's not expecting me." By noon, the plan was set in motion. Elon had arranged to visit one of his lesser-known ventures, a restaurant in the city that catered to a wide range of customers. It wasn't the high-end dining establishments he typically frequented, but it was part of his broader vision to make food more sustainable and accessible. He was curious about how his business was being received by the public, people who didn't know him as a billionaire but simply as a restaurant owner. Elon spent the afternoon putting together his undercover persona. He pulled together a simple outfit, a plain hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap to obscure his face. He looked nothing like the tech mogul people were used to seeing. He looked like anyone else. When he arrived at the restaurant, he parked a few blocks away, choosing to walk the rest of the way on foot. As he approached the entrance, his heart began to race. There was a thrill in this, a sense of liberation he hadn't felt in years. For once, he wasn't Elon Musk, the businessman. He was just a regular guy trying to get a meal. He stepped inside, casually scanning the room. The atmosphere was warm, bustling, and full of life. There were families, students, and professionals, all laughing, chatting, and enjoying their meals. The staff moved efficiently through the restaurant, their movements practiced and quick. No one seemed to notice him, and that was exactly what he wanted. Elon made his way to an open table near the back and sat down. He glanced around, taking in the sights and sounds, savoring the normalcy of it all. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of anonymity. No one knew who he was. No one was watching him with expectations or judgments. He was free, just for a moment. As he waited for a server to approach, he noticed a couple of kids at a nearby table. They were laughing loudly, teasing each other playfully. Their conversation was lighthearted, and their innocence made him smile. They had no idea who he was. To them, he was just another face in the crowd. A waitress came over to take his order, and Elon was struck by her friendly demeanor. She was in her early 20s, with a bright smile and an eagerness to serve. She didn't treat him with the usual reverence people often did when they recognized him. Instead, she treated him like any other customer. "Hi there. What can I get for you today?" she asked, her eyes scanning the menu. Elon took a deep breath. For a moment, he considered ordering something extravagant, just to test the system. But instead, he chose something simple, something he might order if he were just an ordinary customer. "I'll have the cheeseburger and fries, please." The waitress nodded and walked away, and Elon settled back into his seat. He couldn't help but think about how different this experience was. There was no rush, no pressure. No one was asking for a soundbite or looking for the next big announcement. It was just him and the world, as it was, no strings attached. But then, just as he began to relax, he overheard a conversation from the table behind him. Two boys, around the same age as the ones at the other restaurant, were talking about technology. They were animated, discussing everything from artificial intelligence to the possibilities of space exploration. Elon's curiosity piqued, and he found himself listening in. One of the boys, a tall, gangly teenager, spoke excitedly. Imagine if we could actually get to Mars. Think about how that would change everything. But, it seems so impossible right now. His friend, a shorter boy with dark hair, nodded. Yeah, but didn't Elon Musk say he wants to do it? I mean, the guy's done so much already. Electric cars, solar panels, rockets. He's changing the world. Elon's heart skipped a beat. It was surreal. Here he was, sitting just a few feet away from two young boys who were discussing him, without even knowing he was there. They were talking about the very things he spent his life working on, and yet, they had no idea he was listening. For a brief moment, he wondered if they might realize who he was, if they might turn around and see him sitting there in his humble disguise. But they didn't. They continued their conversation, completely unaware that the person they were talking about was right behind them. Elon smiled to himself, appreciating the irony of the situation. He had always been a man of grand ideas, but this small, unnoticed moment felt more meaningful than any press conference or boardroom presentation. It was in these quiet moments, when no one was watching, that Elon realized something crucial. The real world didn't revolve around him. It was about the people, the ideas, and the dreams they shared. And for the first time in a long time, Elon Musk felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Elon sat quietly in the restaurant, processing the conversation between the two boys as they discussed him and his projects. It was strange, hearing himself talked about by people who had no idea he was sitting just a few feet away. For a brief moment, it almost felt like he was living in someone else's world. A world where he wasn't the center of attention, where his identity and fame didn't define every interaction. He was just a man in a hoodie, eating a cheeseburger like anyone else. The waitress returned with his food, placing the steaming plate in front of him. She smiled and asked if he needed anything else. Elon gave a casual nod and thanked her, but he wasn't hungry. He had been too absorbed in the conversations around him to think about the meal in front of him. As the waitress walked away, Elon took a slow sip of his water, thinking about how surreal this moment felt. Here he was, an entrepreneur responsible for changing the world in so many ways, yet for a few moments, he wasn't the face people recognized. He wasn't the founder of Tesla, SpaceX, or any of the other ventures that had made him famous. He was just another person, blending into the crowd. His thoughts drifted back to the two boys behind him. They were enthusiastic, intelligent, full of hope for the future. Their conversation was full of possibilities. They weren't deterred by the challenges Elon knew lay ahead in space exploration, or the reality of how difficult it would be to send humans to Mars. To them, the idea seemed more like an exciting adventure than an impossible task. Their optimism reminded him of the early days of his career when he had dared to dream the impossible. But now, years later, with the weight of so many responsibilities on his shoulders, it was easy to lose sight of that sense of possibility. It was easy to become bogged down by the constant pressure, the never-ending cycle of problem-solving, and the need to stay ahead of the competition. There were days when it felt like he was no longer working toward a dream, but merely trying to maintain the momentum that he had built. Elon realized something important in that moment. These boys, despite their naivety, had something he had lost, a genuine, unshaken belief in the future. They believed anything was possible, and it was that kind of mindset that had propelled him to where he was today. Perhaps he had strayed too far from that early, unrelenting optimism. Perhaps it was time to reconnect with that spark. But the truth was, reconnecting with it wouldn't be easy. Elon's life was a whirlwind of meetings, deadlines, and business decisions. The demands on him were constant, and the pressures were immense. The world was watching him, waiting for him to deliver on the grand promises he had made. And in some ways, the weight of expectation had started to wear him down. He couldn't help but wonder if he was losing himself in the process. Elon took a deep breath and glanced around the restaurant again. The noise, the chatter, the smells, all of it felt so ordinary, so real. He had spent so much time surrounded by innovation and cutting-edge technology that he had forgotten what it was like to just experience life in its most basic form. It was humbling. As he slowly began to eat his cheeseburger, he realized that maybe he needed more of these moments. Maybe he needed to step outside of the world he had built for himself and remember what truly mattered. His connection with people, the way they saw the world, and how he could relate to them on a human level, not just as a CEO or a public figure. But as he sat there, deep in thought, something unexpected happened. The two boys, the ones who had been talking so passionately about space exploration, suddenly stood up from their table. One of them, the shorter boy with dark hair, turned around and looked straight at Elon. For a split second, their eyes locked, and Elon felt a jolt of recognition. The boy hesitated for a moment, then took a few steps forward, walking toward Elon's table. Elon's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to be recognized, especially not here, in this setting where he was just another person. "Excuse me," the boy said, his voice a little nervous, but still full of enthusiasm. "Are you Elon Musk?" Elon smiled, fighting the urge to laugh. "I'm just a regular guy, kid. But yes, I am." The boy's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, you are Elon Musk? Like, the guy who's trying to get to Mars and makes electric cars?" Elon chuckled, nodding. "That's me. But today, I'm just another customer, like anyone else." The boy blinked, clearly processing the situation. He looked back at his friend, who was still sitting at their table, and then back at Elon. "This is crazy. I've read about you so many times. You're like one of the most famous people in the world. What are you doing here, just sitting and eating a cheeseburger?" Elon shrugged. "Sometimes, you need to step away from the spotlight and just be a person. I wanted to experience the restaurant like any other customer would." The boy seemed awestruck, and Elon could see the gears turning in his mind. "I mean, it's amazing what you've done. Seriously, your work with SpaceX is incredible. But I never thought I'd actually meet you, let alone just sit down and have a conversation like this." Elon smiled again, feeling an unexpected warmth. "I'm glad you think that. It's not always about being in the spotlight. Sometimes it's about the people you meet along the way and the connections you make. That's what keeps me going." The boy's friend joined him at the table, his eyes wide with disbelief. Elon looked back at them and realized that, in this moment, they weren't looking at him as the famous figure they had read about. They were looking at him as a person. It was a strange feeling, one he hadn't experienced in years. The boy spoke up again, his tone earnest. "You've inspired us so much, Mr. Musk. Seriously, without you, none of us would think space is possible. You make us believe it's something we can actually achieve." Elon felt a pang in his chest. Their words hit harder than he expected. It wasn't about the fame or the accolades. It was about the way he had impacted their lives, how his work had made them believe in the impossible. It was humbling to hear that, even as he tried to live a normal life, his legacy was still having a profound effect on the next generation. "I'm just doing my part," Elon said quietly. "The real work is all of us together, pushing the boundaries of what's possible." The conversation drifted to other topics, and Elon found himself chatting casually with the boys about their dreams, their goals, and their thoughts on the future. It was a connection he hadn't expected, but one that felt so much more genuine than anything he had experienced in recent years. As the conversation wrapped up and the boys left, Elon sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He hadn't realized it before, but this small, seemingly insignificant encounter had reminded him of why he had started his journey in the first place. It was about pushing boundaries, yes, but it was also about inspiring others, about making people believe in the future and in their own potential. The world didn't need more famous figures. It needed more connections, more people who could inspire and lift each other up. Maybe, just maybe, it was time for him to remember that. After his unexpected encounter with the two boys, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside him. As he left the restaurant, walking back to his car, he felt a weight he hadn't expected, a mix of excitement and something deeper, more unsettling. Those boys had reminded him of something he had nearly forgotten. The world didn't revolve around him. It never had, and it never would. He had spent years building companies that aimed to push humanity toward a better future, but in doing so, he had lost sight of the small, personal connections that had once driven him. And now, as he walked back to his car, he was faced with the harsh reality that he might have sacrificed too much in the name of his ambitions. Was it all worth it? The sound of his shoes tapping on the pavement echoed in the quiet night. but it couldn't drown out the quiet voice in the back of his mind. Was it? He slid into the car, the familiar leather seats welcoming him like an old friend. As the engine roared to life, the usual rush of adrenaline he felt behind the wheel was muted. His thoughts weren't on his next big project or some corporate deal he needed to finalize. They were on the boys, on the way they had looked at him, not as the tech mogul, but as someone who had inspired them. In a way, it was like they had seen the real Elon Musk, the one who dreamed big not just for the sake of ambition, but because he believed in making life better for everyone. That was the Elon he had lost somewhere along the way. By the time he arrived at his home, it was well past midnight. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the door, his mind still racing. Claire, his assistant, had already left for the evening, so the house was quiet. He walked through the front door and made his way to the living room. It was all too familiar, a place that felt like it belonged to someone else. The sleek, modern furniture, the towering windows that overlooked the city skyline. All of it screamed success, but something about it now felt hollow. He sank into the plush couch, his thoughts spiraling. Had he become so obsessed with achieving the impossible that he had neglected the simplest, most human parts of himself? Elon had never been afraid of hard work. He had spent countless sleepless nights building Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures. He had made sacrifices that most people could never even imagine. But now, in the stillness of his home, he realized that the sacrifices he had made weren't just about time or resources. They had taken something much more personal, his ability to connect with the world on a genuine level. The problem was, he had never known how to stop. He had always believed that his work was a means to an end, that if he could just keep pushing forward, if he could just keep creating, everything else would fall into place. But now, that idea seemed flawed. Now, he understood that it wasn't just about moving forward at all costs. It was about the relationships he built, the way he engaged with the world, and the way he made people feel. Sitting in his empty living room, the echoes of his past decisions seemed louder than ever before. Elon had spent so much time building his empire, so much time trying to solve the world's biggest problems, that he had lost sight of the people who had always been by his side. His family, his friends, the people who worked tirelessly alongside him, the ones who had believed in him long before the press conferences, long before the billions of dollars, long before the endless accolades. What had he sacrificed for all of this? It wasn't a question he had an immediate answer to, but the longer he sat in the stillness of his home, the more it seemed like the answer was staring him right in the face. He had sacrificed connection. He had sacrificed time with the people he loved. And in doing so, he had sacrificed his own humanity. His phone buzzed, breaking him from his thoughts. He glanced down to see a message from Claire. "Mr. Musk, I know you've been thinking a lot about the restaurant mission. Can I help with anything else? Let me know if you need to discuss any details or plans moving forward." Elon stared at the message for a moment. He knew Claire was just doing her job, trying to keep him on track, as always. But right now, he didn't need another project. He didn't need to plan some new initiative or set up another press conference. What he needed was something much simpler. He needed to reconnect. Instead of responding to Claire immediately, he decided to call a friend he hadn't spoken to in far too long, someone who had always been a grounding force in his life. He scrolled through his contacts and paused at the name Kimball Musk. His brother. It had been months since they last talked. They had been so caught up in their respective ventures that they hadn't found the time to catch up. He thought about how much they used to talk about everything: life, business, their childhood. Kimball had always been the one who reminded him to stay grounded, to focus on the things that truly mattered. Elon pressed the call button and waited as the phone rang. "Kimball, hey," Elon said when his brother picked up. "I need to talk." "Of course, man. What's going on?" Elon took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About everything, really. I don't know when I lost sight of things, but I've become too focused on the wrong stuff. I've been chasing something, some ideal, and I forgot what really matters." There was a pause on the other end, and then Kimball's voice came through, calm and reassuring. "Elon, you've been pushing yourself, pushing all of us, for years. You've done incredible things. but I think you know what you need. You need balance. You need to reconnect with people, with the world. And I know it's not easy to slow down, but if anyone can do it, it's you." Elon smiled, hearing the sincerity in his brother's voice. "I think you're right. I don't know where I went off track, but I want to fix it." "You're not alone in this, Elon. You never have been," Kimball replied. "Just remember, it's okay to step back sometimes. It's okay to reconnect." For the first time in a while, Elon felt a sense of relief. His brother's words were a reminder of something he had known all along. The most important thing in life wasn't success or innovation. It was the connections we make and the people we choose to surround ourselves with. As they finished their conversation, Elon sat in silence for a while, reflecting on what he had learned that day. His undercover mission had given him more insight than he could have imagined. It wasn't just about how people saw him. It was about how he saw them and how he chose to engage with the world around him. The following days were filled with reflection for Elon. He had always been known for his relentless pursuit of innovation and the big-picture thinking that had led to so much of his success. But now, after his conversation with Kimball, Elon found himself questioning whether he had been overlooking something just as important: the smaller moments. The personal connections, the laughter shared over dinner, the quiet moments spent with family, and even the simple joy of being able to sit down at a restaurant without the pressures of his usual life. He had come to a realization. He had been running at full speed, toward goals that were often dictated by deadlines and obligations, rather than genuine passion. Sure, the work he did was still meaningful, and the projects he was involved in still had the potential to change the world. But perhaps, just perhaps, he had lost sight of why he started this journey in the first place. He stared out the window of his office, gazing at the sprawling city below. It was beautiful in a way, a reflection of everything he had built, and yet it felt distant. It felt empty, almost like a painting on the wall. Something to look at, but not something that truly resonated with him at a personal level. For the past few days, Elon had been trying to make time for the little things, checking in with friends, taking phone calls from family, and, most importantly, spending more time away from the high-stakes demands of his companies. But it wasn't as easy as he'd hoped. The pull of his work was always there, lurking in the background. There were constant updates about Tesla's production, SpaceX's latest developments, and 100 other small details that seemed to demand his attention. He couldn't help it. His mind was wired to think about these things. But in the moments when he wasn't working, when he wasn't consumed by the next big challenge, he was finding something important: time to breathe, to live. He picked up his phone and scrolled through the latest updates in his inbox. There was an email from SpaceX about an upcoming rocket test launch, another update from Tesla about the latest prototype, and then there was a message from Claire. "Mr. Musk, there's a charity event tomorrow evening in LA that you may want to attend. It's a good cause, and you'll be representing Tesla and SpaceX in front of some important figures." Elon sighed. He could already feel the pressure building. Events like this were crucial for the companies, but they also pulled him into a cycle of public appearances that felt more like a performance than a genuine interaction. He stared at the email for a moment longer, contemplating the choice before him. He could attend the event, smile for the cameras, give a well-rehearsed speech, and be done with it. Or he could say no and take a step back. He could skip this one and do something that truly mattered to him. A small voice inside his head whispered, "Maybe it's time to start living your life in a way that actually fulfills you, not just your company's." Elon put the phone down and made a decision. He would skip the event. For the first time in years, he would take a step back and prioritize something that wasn't directly tied to his empire. He reached out to Kimball later that evening, asking if he was free to meet the following day. "I'm thinking about taking a break from the whirlwind," Elon said in the text. "Maybe we could catch up. Just the two of us." It was a small decision, but it felt right. The pressure that had been mounting inside of him seemed to ease just a little bit. He needed space. He needed to step away from the spotlight, from the relentless schedule that had once been his life. The next day, Elon found himself on a quiet hiking trail in the mountains with Kimball. The sun was shining, and the air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine trees and fresh earth. It was a far cry from the glass towers and high-tech labs that made up so much of his day-to-day life. This was different. It was slower, simpler. As they walked side by side, Elon felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease. They talked about old memories, childhood adventures, and the challenges they had faced over the years. For the first time in a long while, Elon wasn't talking about rockets, cars, or energy grids. He was just talking, and it felt good. Kimball, as always, had a way of making things feel lighter. You know, he said, it's amazing what happens when you actually take a moment to breathe. Most people never even think about it. They're too busy running from one thing to the next. Elon smiled. I think I've been running for a while now. Kimball gave him a sidelong glance, his eyes filled with understanding. Maybe it's time to stop. It's not like you've stopped making a difference, Elon. It's just, there's more to life than the work. You know that, right? Elon nodded slowly, taking in his brother's words. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he was starting to understand the message loud and clear. Life wasn't just about what he could accomplish, it was about how he lived it, how he made time for the things that mattered. It wasn't about accumulating accolades or conquering the next frontier. It was about finding joy in the simple moments, in the relationships that mattered, and in the moments when you could just be. After hours of hiking and talking, the two of them sat on a rock overlooking a breathtaking view of the valley below. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow across the landscape. For the first time in a long time, Elon felt a sense of peace. I don't know if I'll ever fully be able to slow down, Elon said, looking out over the horizon. But I do know this. I need to make more room for moments like this. Kimball smiled, the kind of smile that came from years of shared history and understanding. You don't have to do it all, Elon. And you don't have to do it alone. Elon sat in silence for a moment, the weight of those words sinking in. He had spent so much of his life thinking that he had to do everything on his own. But now, surrounded by his brother and the quiet serenity of the mountains, he was beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry the world on his shoulders alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final burst of light across the landscape, Elon made a silent vow to himself. He would find balance. He would reconnect with the world beyond his work, and he would cherish the moments that truly mattered. The following week felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time in a long time, Elon allowed himself to slow down, really slow down. He spent the day with Kimball at his organic farm, getting his hands dirty in the soil, far removed from the gleaming screens and high-tech operations that usually consumed his every waking hour. The air was thick with the earthy scent of growing vegetables, and there was a calming rhythm to the work, a stark contrast to the frenzy of his usual days. It was humbling in a way. The dirt under his fingernails, the simple act of helping Kimball tend to his crops, it was grounding. There was no fanfare, no cameras, no expectations. It was just family, hard work, and the shared silence of labor. Elon realized, with each passing hour, how much he had missed the simplicity of it all. As they worked together, they didn't talk about SpaceX or Tesla, or the future of AI or electric vehicles. They just talked. About family, about life. Kimball mentioned a new restaurant he wanted to open, a project that combined his love for food and his commitment to sustainable farming. Elon smiled, genuinely interested, but not driven by the need to analyze or pitch ideas. He was just there, in the moment. By the time the day was winding down, Elon found himself sitting on a bench overlooking the farm. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden hue over everything. It was peaceful. He hadn't felt this peaceful in a long time. For the first time in ages, he realized that he hadn't been thinking about work, not about his companies or what new venture needed his attention. He hadn't felt the usual gnawing pressure to perform, to innovate, to conquer. He was simply present. It was a moment of clarity. The next day, Elon returned to his office, but things felt different. He sat at his desk, but his mind was quieter, more at ease. For once, he wasn't diving straight into the latest reports or responding to an endless stream of emails. Instead, he allowed himself to breathe for a moment before diving into the necessary tasks. The shift in his attitude wasn't instant, and it wasn't perfect. There were still moments when his mind wandered back to the pressures that came with his high-profile career. But he felt more equipped to deal with them, more centered. The balance he'd been searching for, although still elusive, was starting to take root. His phone buzzed again, snapping him from his thoughts. It was a message from Claire. "Mr. Musk, I know you've been taking time to reflect, but I've scheduled a meeting with some potential investors for your new restaurant concept in Los Angeles. They're eager to meet with you and discuss the future of the project. The restaurant is getting a lot of attention, and we think it could be a big win for you and your team." Elon's eyes skimmed the message, and for a split second, he felt the familiar rush of excitement and pressure. This was a big opportunity, something that could push him into an entirely new space. But then, as the initial wave of adrenaline began to hit, Elon did something surprising. He paused. He didn't immediately respond with the usual fervor, didn't dive straight into making arrangements or preparing for the meeting. He took a deep breath and set the phone aside. He had learned something over the last few days. It wasn't just about seizing every opportunity, about being on all the time. It was about finding the right balance, about making thoughtful decisions rather than just reacting to the demands of the world. After a few minutes, Elon picked up the phone and typed a simple reply. "I'm interested, but I'd like to take a step back from this meeting. Let's schedule a time to meet later in the week. I want to take some time to think things through." He sent the message before he could second-guess himself. As he placed the phone down again, Elon felt a strange sense of relief. This wasn't about rejecting opportunities. It was about taking control over the pace of his life. The world might keep moving quickly, but he didn't have to move at that pace if it wasn't what he wanted. He wasn't going to allow himself to get caught up in the race again without asking himself, "Is this what I really want?" It was a small decision, but it was a step toward the kind of life Elon wanted to create. One where he wasn't just reacting to external pressures, but taking the time to understand his own needs and desires. The next few days were filled with moments of quiet reflection. Elon began to carve out time for personal activities that brought him joy, taking long walks in the park, reading books not about business but about philosophy, art, and history. He even took up cooking as a hobby, something he had never considered before. In the evenings, he would relax in his backyard, watching the sunset and allowing his thoughts to settle, far away from the distractions of meetings and endless emails. Through it all, he was beginning to realize that the true measure of success wasn't how much he accomplished, but how much he allowed himself to experience the richness of life outside of work. The time spent with Kimball, the moments of stillness, the laughter shared with old friends, it was all part of what made life meaningful. One afternoon, after a particularly quiet day, Elon sat down to write in his journal. It had become a habit over the past week, writing down his thoughts, his reflections, and his goals. He found it a calming way to sort through the jumble of ideas in his mind. "I've always been so focused on the next thing," he wrote, "the next project, the next launch, the next idea. But what about now? What about the present?" He paused, considering the question. It was something he hadn't asked himself in years, at least not in such an intentional way. What about now? What about finding meaning in the everyday moments? As he closed the journal and set it aside, Elon made a decision. He wasn't going to let the demands of his career rob him of his peace any longer. He would still work hard, still pursue the things that mattered to him, but he would do so on his own terms. The way he approached his work, his relationships, and his life had to change. It was time to focus not just on success, but on fulfillment. That evening, as he sat down for dinner with his family, he looked around the table and realized just how much he had been missing. The laughter of his children, the warmth of their voices, and the quiet comfort of being with loved ones. It was everything he had been chasing, but in a way, it was all here now. He didn't need to keep running. For the first time in years, Elon Musk felt that he had finally found something that had been eluding him: balance. It was a feeling of peace, of contentment, and a reminder that there was more to life than just the next big thing. Elon's life was beginning to look different, more grounded and more intentional. The small, everyday moments he had started to prioritize were helping him reframe how he viewed both his personal and professional worlds. He still had a busy life, of course. He couldn't simply abandon his role as a leader and innovator in industries as monumental as electric vehicles and space exploration. But the way he approached his responsibilities had shifted. He no longer felt the compulsive need to control every outcome or micromanage every situation. Instead, he was learning the power of letting go. A few days after the dinner with his family, Elon found himself at his desk once again. The emails were piling up, the schedules were relentless, but there was a quiet, steady resolve within him. This time, he wasn't diving headfirst into the work with that familiar anxiety. Instead, he paused. He noticed the little things, the sunlight streaming through his office window, the coffee cup resting on his desk, the sound of birds outside the window. These small details, which once seemed insignificant, now felt significant in their own way. They reminded him that life could be more than just the grind. He clicked open an email from Claire, one of his most trusted executives. It was a comprehensive report about Tesla's upcoming quarterly earnings, which, as usual, was packed with charts, graphs, and projections. Normally, Elon would have reviewed every detail meticulously, analyzing the numbers to a degree that would have put a seasoned accountant to shame. But this time, he took a deep breath before clicking the document open. "Focus on the big picture, not the nitty-gritty," he whispered to himself. Instead of reading every line, Elon scanned the highlights. He allowed himself to trust the team and their expertise. He knew that his role was not to do every task himself, but to provide vision, guidance, and the necessary support for his people to thrive. As he reviewed the document, it became clear to him that this shift in mindset, this letting go of micromanagement, was exactly what Tesla needed. His company was innovative and driven by some of the brightest minds in the world. They didn't need him to hover over every decision. They needed him to set the course, guide them through uncertain waters, and, most importantly, to give them the freedom to create. He had created a culture of innovation within his teams, but now it was time to let them flourish without his constant interference. After reviewing the report, Elon sent a brief, confident email back to Claire. "Great work. Let's move forward with these projections. I trust the team to execute. I'll be available for any strategic discussions as needed. Keep me posted." He hit send, a strange sense of relief washing over him. This was different. It wasn't about relinquishing control. It was about understanding when to let go and trust in others. In the past, he had believed that he was the key to Tesla's success, but now he understood that the company's true strength lay in its collective efforts. Later that afternoon, Elon took another step toward embracing the idea of letting go. A meeting was scheduled with SpaceX's mission control team regarding the next Mars launch. The room was packed with engineers, scientists, and specialists all eager to present their findings and ideas. Normally, Elon would have dominated the discussion, weighing in on every detail of the mission, suggesting changes, and providing his usual visionary perspective. But today, he decided to sit back. Instead of launching into the meeting with his usual fire, he simply listened. He let the experts speak. He asked a few clarifying questions, but didn't feel the need to steer every conversation. It was liberating, almost surreal. As the meeting progressed, Elon felt an odd sense of satisfaction, knowing that he didn't need to have all the answers. The team was smart, and they had their own ideas, some of which were even better than his own. When the meeting concluded, he thanked the team for their hard work and walked out of the room with a sense of pride. SpaceX wasn't just Elon Musk anymore. It was a reflection of the collective efforts of an incredible team of people who had come together to achieve something extraordinary. At dinner that night, he reflected on the day's events. There had been a time when he would have felt restless, anxious about letting go of some of his responsibilities. But now, it felt freeing. Letting go didn't mean abandoning control. It meant trusting the people around him and recognizing that success wasn't just about his own vision, but the combined efforts of many talented individuals. The real question, he realized, was not whether he could do it all himself, but whether he could inspire others to rise to their full potential. Kimball had always reminded him of the importance of trusting others. He smiled, thinking of their conversation during the hike. Sometimes, Kimball had said, "You've got to give people the chance to do what they do best." That wisdom was starting to sink in, and Elon was beginning to see the profound truth in it. The more he allowed others to take the lead, the more they flourished, and in turn, so did he. He was no longer chained to the need for constant action and control. That evening, he sent a message to Kimball. "I think I'm starting to get it. It's about balance, letting go, trusting the people around me, and finding joy in the process." not just the outcome. Kimball's reply was swift and simple. Told you so. Enjoy the journey, brother. You've got this. The next morning, as Elon walked into his office, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenge before him wasn't just to continue innovating and creating. It was to do so with a sense of trust, of letting the world around him evolve naturally without trying to control every single moment. He would still be a leader, but now he was embracing the idea that leadership was about empowering others, not just steering the ship. As the days went by, Elon continued to refine this new approach. He allowed his teams to take on more responsibility, stepping back more often, but also becoming more present when his input was truly needed. He learned to embrace uncertainty, knowing that the best results often came from letting things unfold without constant interference. He wasn't perfect, and the path to true balance was still a work in progress, but Elon Musk was learning how to let go. It was a subtle shift, but it was one that would change the way he approached everything, from business to family to personal well-being. And for the first time in a long time, Elon felt truly alive. The following weeks were both a whirlwind and a moment of rare calm for Elon Musk. As he allowed himself to let go more and more, he found that the world didn't collapse around him. In fact, it seemed to thrive. His teams at Tesla and SpaceX were operating like well-oiled machines, with innovations rolling out, projects being executed, and results being delivered, all without him having to intervene every moment. The shift he had made was profound, and yet it didn't come without its own set of challenges. While the freedom to step back was liberating, there were still moments when he felt that pull to jump in, to solve problems, to fix things. It was in his nature. The desire to be in control, to have all the answers. It had always been there, a driving force that had helped propel him to the heights of success. But now, for the first time, he was learning to sit with the discomfort of not having all the answers, of trusting others to handle what he had always thought needed his personal touch. One evening, as he sat on the patio of his home, Elon found himself reflecting on his journey. The stars above twinkled brightly in the clear night sky, and for a brief moment, he felt as though he were part of something much larger than the companies he had built. There was a profound sense of peace in the quiet that surrounded him, something he hadn't experienced in years. He wasn't thinking about deadlines or project proposals. He was simply existing in the moment. But that peace was suddenly interrupted by the ping of his phone. A text from Claire. Mr. Musk, we've just received an unexpected challenge. The engineers at SpaceX have identified a major flaw in the Mars rocket's fuel system. It could delay the entire mission by several months. They've already begun brainstorming solutions, but we need your input. Elon felt the familiar stir of anxiety. This was exactly the kind of problem he usually dealt with head-on. The perfectionist in him wanted to jump into action immediately, start reviewing plans, calling the engineers, offering solutions. But he had learned something important in the past few weeks. The first instinct isn't always the best one. He didn't need to rush in. Not this time. Instead of texting back immediately, he took a deep breath. He placed the phone down and closed his eyes, allowing himself to feel the calm he had worked so hard to cultivate. For a moment, he imagined the team working together, finding solutions, brainstorming new ideas. The idea of giving them space to tackle this challenge without his immediate intervention felt right. After a few minutes, Elon replied to Claire, "Let the team do what they do best. I trust them to find the solution. I'll check in tomorrow." He stared at the message for a moment before hitting send. It wasn't easy, but this time, he was practicing what he had been preaching. He trusted his people. They were capable. He didn't need to shoulder every burden. The next day, Elon received an update from the engineering team at SpaceX. They had found a potential solution for the fuel system issue, and while it would require some modifications to the design, the mission timeline was still feasible. Elon smiled to himself as he read the report. The team had handled it, just as he had hoped. They had done their jobs, and they had done them well. This victory wasn't his alone. It was a collective achievement, a reminder of the power of trust, collaboration, and the strength that comes from allowing others to step up. Elon realized that his desire to solve everything himself was a relic of his old mindset. The new version of himself was one who led with confidence, empowering others to take ownership and responsibility. But there was still another challenge ahead. one that Elon had been avoiding for some time now. The restaurant project, which had started as an idea, was growing rapidly. The excitement around it had only increased, and with that came mounting pressure. He had known, when he first got involved, that it would be a huge undertaking. But as time went on, he found himself feeling more and more stretched. He was still committed to the idea, but there was a growing feeling in the back of his mind that he couldn't juggle it all forever. It was one thing to trust his teams at Tesla and SpaceX. It was another thing entirely to trust others with something so personal. The restaurant, after all, wasn't just another business venture. It was something he had poured his heart into. It was a reflection of his values, his love for sustainable, healthy food, his passion for family, and his desire to make a tangible difference in people's lives. The concept had been born from the same curiosity and drive that had powered all of his other ventures. But this was different. The restaurant had the potential to connect with people on a more personal level. Elon found himself sitting at his desk, staring at the restaurant's branding materials, its sleek design, its commitment to local, sustainable ingredients, its potential to change the way people thought about dining. He had dreamed of creating something that could bring communities together, offering a place where people could enjoy great food while supporting local farmers. But now, as the project grew, so did the weight of responsibility. It was clear that he couldn't carry this burden alone. He needed a team he could trust to take the reins and manage the day-to-day operations. And yet, the thought of handing over control, of letting go of something so personal, was daunting. For the next few days, Elon grappled with this decision. He knew that in order to move forward, he had to let go in the same way he had done with his other ventures. But could he do it? Could he truly relinquish control of something that felt so deeply connected to his own identity? He spent time talking with Kimball, who had been a constant source of wisdom throughout this journey. Kimball had already found great success in his own ventures related to food and sustainability, and his perspective was invaluable. Elon, Kimball said during one of their conversations, I know you're used to being in the driver's seat, but this is different. This isn't just about you. It's about the people who believe in what you're doing. The restaurant, it has the power to change lives, but it's not all on you. You don't have to carry the weight of it alone. Elon nodded, hearing his brother's words, but still struggling to let them sink in. How could he take a step back from something that was so important to him? In the end, it wasn't just about the restaurant. It was about the bigger lesson he had been learning all along. The power of letting go wasn't just in trusting others, it was in trusting the process. He had trusted his teams at SpaceX and Tesla. Now, it was time to trust the people around him who were just as passionate about the restaurant as he was. That evening, Elon made a decision. He would appoint a restaurant CEO, someone with experience in the food industry, someone who could take the lead and manage the day-to-day operations while he focused on the bigger picture. It was the same principle he had applied to his other ventures. Trust the people around you, empower them, and let them do their jobs. It was time to let go. And in doing so, Elon Musk was learning that the greatest challenges in life were not the ones that required him to do everything himself, but the ones that required him to trust others, and himself, enough to step back. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weeks following his decision to step back from the restaurant project were filled with a new kind of tension for Elon. He had made the choice to delegate more, but each day brought a new layer of complexity to his thoughts. While he knew it was the right thing to do for both himself and the project, there was still a lingering doubt in his mind. Was he truly ready to give up so much control over something so deeply personal to him? The question echoed in his head, much like the hum of a machine that refused to stop. Though he had trusted others with key responsibilities, Elon continued to stay involved in the high-level strategy. He still kept in close touch with the new CEO of the restaurant and attended key meetings. He didn't want to disappear entirely. He still cared deeply about the mission, but he was finding it increasingly difficult to be hands-off, particularly when things weren't progressing exactly as he envisioned. The restaurant's early days had been a mix of excitement and unforeseen challenges. There had been hiccups with suppliers, and the customer service experience had yet to match his high expectations. Every time he visited the restaurant, he found himself scrutinizing the smallest details, the the layout of the space, the menu offerings, the service flow. The perfectionist within him wanted everything to be flawless, to represent his vision down to the last detail. Despite these feelings of discomfort, he understood something profound. The journey wasn't supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be a test of his ability to let go, to let things unfold in their own time, to trust that the right people were in place to carry the vision forward. This wasn't about achieving perfection at every turn. It was about embracing the imperfections, learning from mistakes, and adjusting along the way. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Elon found himself at the restaurant once again. This time, he wasn't there as the owner or the innovator. He was simply a guest, sitting at a table with his family, observing the experience from a customer's perspective. The restaurant was bustling with energy, the sounds of laughter and conversation filling the space. He took it all in, recognizing that despite the challenges, there was something special about this place. Kimball was with him, of course, always there to support and offer insight. As they sat across from each other, sharing a meal together, Kimball noticed Elon's thoughtful gaze. "You know, this place is doing more than just serving food, right?" Kimball said, breaking the silence. Elon looked up, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "It's bringing people together. Look around. People are talking, laughing, and sharing moments. It's a place that feels real. It's not perfect, but it's alive. And that's what matters." Elon smiled, taking in his brother's words. Kimball had always had a way of seeing the bigger picture, of recognizing the value in things that weren't necessarily obvious at first glance. "You're right," Elon said, nodding slowly. "Maybe I've been too focused on the details. I've been looking for perfection, but maybe the real value lies in the experience itself. The feeling that people are connecting, the way the food brings them together." Kimball leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. "Exactly. And that's something you can't control. You've given it your vision, your heart. Now, let it be what it's meant to be." It was then that Elon realized something significant. He had been so consumed by his own vision of perfection that he had missed the very essence of what the restaurant was becoming. It wasn't just about the food or the environment. It was about the people. It was about the sense of community that it was fostering, the way it made people feel like they were part of something bigger. It didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be authentic. Elon's realization felt like a weight being lifted from his shoulders. He no longer felt the need to control every aspect of the business. Instead, he could focus on the broader mission, creating a place that mattered, a place that resonated with people. And as long as the team continued to believe in that mission, it was enough. They were the ones who would help it grow. They were the ones who would make it their own. That night, after dinner, Elon sat quietly in the car, staring out the window as they drove home. He felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. The anxiety that had once consumed him was beginning to fade. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he had to be everywhere at once, doing everything himself. He had made the decision to trust others, and in doing so, he was starting to see the fruits of that trust. As the days passed, Elon kept his promise to himself. He stepped back, allowing his team to take more ownership. But he didn't disengage. He remained an active participant, just from a distance. His role had evolved from that of a micromanager to that of a visionary, a guide, a mentor. He wasn't perfect, and the restaurant wasn't perfect either. But it was growing, evolving, and becoming something special, something that had the potential to change the way people thought about food, sustainability, and community. And that, he realized, was worth the effort. Elon had learned that it wasn't just about making something successful, it was about building something meaningful. Success, he now understood, wasn't measured by perfection but by impact. And as long as the restaurant continued to bring people together, continue to serve great food with a purpose, it would be a success. But beyond that, this journey had become about his own growth. He was learning to let go, to embrace imperfection, and to trust the process. And perhaps in the end, that was the greatest achievement of all. As weeks turned into months, Elon Musk found himself adjusting to his new way of being. For years, he had been known as the visionary who was involved in every minute detail of his ventures. Whether it was Tesla, SpaceX, or his new restaurant initiative, He had always prided himself on his deep immersion in all aspects of his businesses. But now, as he watched his teams rise to the occasion, he was slowly shedding the need to be everywhere at once. It was liberating in many ways, but also difficult. There were moments when his old instincts kicked in, the urge to make decisions, to solve problems, to fix things. But he had been practicing patience, learning to trust that his team could handle what needed to be done without his interference. In the meantime, the restaurant continued to grow. It had established itself as a local favorite, offering an experience that went beyond just food. It was about community, sustainability, and the shared joy of eating together. Elon had been present for the grand opening and several key moments of the restaurant's growth, but each time he visited, he felt the pull to step back further, to allow the team to carry the project forward. Yet there was still something gnawing at him. It wasn't that the restaurant was failing, it was thriving. But in the quiet of his mind, he often wondered whether it was enough. Was this really the legacy he wanted to leave? Was the restaurant just another business? Or could it be something truly transformative? One late evening, Elon sat in his home office, scrolling through the latest reports. SpaceX was on track for its next big launch, and Tesla's newest electric vehicle was gaining traction in the market. The restaurant was doing well, but there was that nagging feeling again. The question remained, was this what he truly wanted to be remembered for? He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. It had been a long day of meetings, discussions, and decision-making. He felt a momentary sense of exhaustion, but it wasn't the kind that came from physical tiredness. It was the mental strain of balancing so many ventures, so many directions at once. And then there was the restaurant. He hadn't visited in a few days, and part of him wondered if that absence had allowed the project to breathe in ways it hadn't before. He had entrusted the team with the reins, and he was beginning to see the fruits of their labor. The concept had evolved into something unique, something that felt like it was more than just a restaurant. It was a reflection of his values, but it was also becoming something larger than that. It was starting to carve out its own identity. But could he really stay out of the way? Could he allow the restaurant to grow on its own without imposing his will? He wanted to. He knew that the more he tried to control it, the more he risked stifling its potential. Yet, it was hard to shake the feeling that he was still too involved, that he still had too much influence. As he sat there, deep in thought, the door to his office opened. Kimball stepped in, a knowing look on his face. "Still thinking about the restaurant?" Kimball asked, leaning against the doorframe. Elon didn't even need to answer. Kimball knew him too well. "You're still worried about whether it's enough, aren't you?" Kimball continued. "You're wondering if this is the thing that will define you." Elon sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I don't know. It's just, there's so much more I want to do, so many things I want to change in the world. And sometimes, I wonder if this is the right path." Kimball walked over and sat on the edge of the desk. "Look, Elon, I get it. You've built some of the most innovative companies in the world. You've revolutionized industries. But the restaurant, it's different. It's not about innovation for the sake of innovation. It's about making people's lives better, one meal at a time. You've always believed in the power of community, and this restaurant is a way to bring that vision to life." Elon listened carefully, nodding. Kimball's words always had a way of cutting through his doubt. "You've already done a lot of incredible things," Kimball added. "But this is your chance to leave a mark on people's hearts. The impact you're making isn't going to be measured in stock prices or rockets launched. It's going to be measured in the lives you touch, in the families you bring together around a meal, in the conversations that happen over dinner. It's not about perfection. It's about connection." Elon sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of his brother's words sink in. "You're right," he finally said. "It's not about what I want it to be. It's about what it's becoming and what it can become for others." Kimball smiled. "Exactly. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to trust that something will grow without needing your constant input. You've given it your heart and your vision. Now, let it grow in its own way." Elon felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in a long while, he realized that he didn't need to be constantly involved. He didn't need to be the one to make every decision. His role wasn't to control the outcome, but to help create an environment where growth could happen naturally. And maybe, just maybe, That was the lesson he needed to learn. The next morning, Elon decided to pay another visit to the restaurant. This time, he would go as a true guest, without the desire to oversee everything, without the compulsion to fix things. He would go there simply to enjoy the experience, to observe the energy of the place, to see how it was evolving without his constant presence. As he walked into the restaurant, the first thing he noticed was the hum of activity. People were laughing, talking, eating, and enjoying themselves. The staff was engaged, moving seamlessly through the space. It felt alive, vibrant, and real. The atmosphere was exactly what he had hoped for. He sat at a table by the window, his meal arriving shortly after. The food was delicious, of course, but what struck him more than anything was the feeling of belonging, of community. The restaurant wasn't perfect, but it was full of life. It was making an impact, and that was enough. As he finished his meal and looked around, Elon realized that he had already succeeded. Not because the restaurant was flawless, but because it had found its own place in the world. It was shaping up to be something that people would remember for its authenticity, its heart, and its connection to something bigger than just food. For the first time in a long while, Elon felt that his place in this project was no longer to micromanage or control. His role had shifted, to be a silent partner, a visionary who had set things in motion and trusted the process. And that, he realized, was enough. The months following Elon's realization that he didn't need to micromanage the restaurant brought a strange sense of calm. The restaurant was flourishing, and while it wasn't without its hurdles, Elon felt a sense of peace knowing it was being run by capable people. His team was pulling together to create a unique experience for customers, and word was spreading fast. More and more people were discovering what had once been a small project, transforming it into a local favorite. The atmosphere was always buzzing with energy, and Elon began visiting less frequently. However, the peace wouldn't last forever. One evening, while attending a business meeting for Tesla, Elon's phone buzzed with a text from the CEO of the restaurant. His stomach dropped as he read the brief message. "We have a situation. Need you to come in tomorrow morning. It's urgent." The unease he'd once felt in the earlier days of the restaurant rushed back. He didn't want to overreact, but this was something different. Urgency. It was a word that carried weight in his world. Elon immediately excused himself from the meeting and got into his car, heading straight for the restaurant. His mind was racing with possibilities. Had there been an accident? A health scare with one of the staff? Or was it something worse, a foodborne illness outbreak or a public scandal? As he walked into the restaurant the following morning, he was greeted by his CEO, Sarah, who was waiting for him in the office. She didn't look panicked, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes that didn't go unnoticed. "Good morning, Elon. Thanks for coming in so quickly," Sarah said, offering him a seat at the table. She handed him a coffee, which he accepted with a distracted nod. "What's going on?" Elon asked, his tone betraying his anxiety. Sarah took a deep breath, pausing for a moment before speaking. "It's the reviews. They've taken a sudden turn for the worse." Elon's brows furrowed. "What do you mean? We've been getting great reviews for months." "I know, but last night, a viral review started making the rounds online. It's causing some serious backlash," Sarah explained. "A well-known food critic posted a scathing review, and now there's an influx of negative comments coming from customers. It's gotten pretty heated on social media, and people are starting to question whether we can actually deliver on our promises." Elon's mind was racing now. A viral review? They were still relatively new to the restaurant scene, and this kind of publicity could be disastrous for a brand still establishing itself. "Do we know who the critic is?" Elon asked, his voice more composed now that he had the details. Sarah nodded. "His name's Marcus Bellamy. He's known for his harsh critiques, but he has a strong following. He's been to some of the top restaurants, and when he talks, people listen." Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration building inside him. They had put so much effort into this project, and now, a single review could unravel it. The last thing he wanted was for their hard work to be overshadowed by negativity. "I want to see the review," Elon said, standing up and pacing. "Let's see what he said." Sarah quickly pulled up the review on her laptop and showed it to him. The critic's words were harsh, accusing the restaurant of being nothing more than a facade. and claiming that the food was underwhelming and the service was subpar. The review ended with a simple, biting statement: "Don't waste your time. There are better places out there." Elon felt the familiar sting of criticism, but he knew he couldn't afford to react emotionally. Instead, he had to think strategically. This was a challenge, a test of their resilience. "All right," Elon said, after a long silence. "We're not going to let this derail us. Sarah, I want you to make a public statement. Let's acknowledge the review, but more importantly, let's focus on what makes us different. We're not here to be perfect. We're here to offer something real, something genuine." Sarah nodded, visibly relieved that Elon wasn't panicking. "I'll get started on that. But I think we also need to address the staff. They'll need to be prepared for the backlash, and we'll have to make sure they feel supported." Elon agreed. "Definitely. Let's have a meeting with the team today. They need to know we have their backs." The following hours were filled with fast-paced decisions and strategizing. Elon found himself working alongside Sarah to draft a public response, one that would not only address the criticism head-on, but also reaffirm their commitment to authenticity and community. They knew the review was just one person's opinion, but the impact of it had already started to spread. The restaurant wasn't perfect. There were always areas that could improve, and they had always known that. But they couldn't let one negative voice define them. Their mission was greater than that. Later that afternoon, Elon walked into the kitchen and addressed the team. The restaurant's chefs, servers, and staff members were gathered around, all looking up at him with varying degrees of concern. "We've been hit with some negative attention," Elon began, his voice calm but firm. "One food critic decided to post a scathing review, and it's made the rounds. But here's the truth. We know who we are, and we know what we're about. We're not perfect, but we're real, and that's what sets us apart. We're creating something meaningful, something that matters to people. So don't let one voice take away your pride in the work you're doing here. We're in this together." The team nodded in agreement, the tension in the room starting to ease. Elon could feel the collective resolve growing as they rallied around the vision they had worked so hard to build. In the coming days, the restaurant posted their public response, thanking Marcus Bellamy for his feedback while emphasizing their commitment to growth and improvement. They invited customers to come and experience the restaurant for themselves, offering a limited-time discount to show that they were confident in the quality they delivered. The response was met with a mixture of support and skepticism. Some people rallied behind the restaurant, praising its transparency and openness, while others remained critical. But the backlash started to dissipate as quickly as it had appeared. People's attention was fleeting, and the restaurant's authenticity began to shine through. As the dust settled, Elon found himself reflecting on the challenge. It had been a test, not just of the restaurant's resilience, but of his own. The experience had reminded him that, even with all his innovations, things didn't always go as planned. And that was okay. What mattered most was how they responded. They hadn't crumbled under the pressure. They hadn't tried to hide or cover up the criticism. Instead, they had faced it head-on, with integrity and confidence. And that, Elon realized, was the key to success. They weren't just building a restaurant. They were building something bigger than that. Something that could withstand the challenges and still come out stronger on the other side. The aftermath of the viral review had left Elon and the team feeling a mix of relief and renewed determination. They had weathered the storm, and while they weren't free of challenges, they now had a stronger sense of who they were as a business. They had learned a valuable lesson in the power of authenticity and resilience, and they were committed to building on that foundation. But just as the restaurant began to settle into its rhythm again, another unexpected turn of events occurred. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Sarah called Elon. She sounded unusually excited. "Elon, you're not going to believe this. We've been contacted by someone very special," she said, barely containing her enthusiasm. "It's one of the most influential people in the culinary world, Chef Gianna Hart. She wants to meet with us. She's interested in collaborating." Elon's heart skipped a beat. Chef Gianna Hart was legendary in the culinary world. Her restaurants were Michelin-starred, and her influence was immeasurable. The fact that she was reaching out to them, especially after the recent review, was a big deal. "I've heard of her. She's one of the best in the business," Elon said, trying to remain calm. "How did she hear about us?" She saw the way we handled the review, Sarah explained. She respects the way we responded and values the authenticity behind our mission. She believes we have the potential to make a real impact on the food scene, and she wants to discuss ways to collaborate. Elon couldn't believe it. A collaboration with Chef Gianna Hart? This could elevate their restaurant to a whole new level, but it also brought with it a new set of challenges. Could they maintain their identity while working with someone as established as Chef Hart? "I'll be there," Elon said, feeling a wave of excitement and nervousness. "Let's set it up." The meeting was scheduled for the following week, and Elon couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. As much as he had grown comfortable with the direction the restaurant was heading, this opportunity was different. It felt like the next big leap, but he couldn't afford to lose sight of their mission. When the day arrived, Elon and Sarah made their way to the restaurant where Chef Gianna was meeting them. The sleek, modern space was filled with the kind of energy you'd expect from a high-end dining establishment. Chef Gianna was already there, seated at a table, her presence commanding and warm. She was every bit the culinary icon that the media made her out to be, but she had an ease about her that made Elon feel more at home. "Elon, Sarah, it's a pleasure to finally meet you both," Chef Gianna said, her voice both confident and inviting. "I've been hearing a lot about your restaurant and the unique approach you've taken. I have to say, I'm impressed." Elon smiled, trying to ease into the conversation. "Thank you, Chef Hart. We're honored that you're interested in what we're doing here. It's been a journey, and we're still learning." Sarah jumped in, her tone enthusiastic. "We're really focused on building community and making our restaurant a place that people can connect over food. It's not just about the meals we serve. It's about the experience we create." Chef Gianna nodded, clearly intrigued. "I can see that. You've created something special, and that's exactly what drew me to you. I've spent my entire career focusing on creating world-class experiences in the kitchen, but what's missing for me in the industry right now is connection. So much of the dining world is focused on competition and status. What you've built is about something more. I think we can do something incredible together." Elon listened intently, sensing that this conversation could lead to something significant, something beyond the success of a single restaurant. "But I'm curious," Chef Gianna continued. "What's your long-term vision for this place? Where do you see it going?" Elon paused, taking a moment to reflect on the question. For the first time in a while, he realized that he had never really taken the time to articulate the bigger picture. He had been so caught up in the day-to-day operations, the reviews, the crises, that he hadn't truly thought about what they were trying to accomplish on a grand scale. "Our goal is to create a dining experience that goes beyond the food," Elon began slowly. "We want to build a space where people feel a genuine sense of belonging, a place where families, friends, and strangers can come together, share stories, and form connections. We believe that food is a powerful vehicle for bringing people together, and we want to build something that fosters that. Whether it's through sustainability, the quality of ingredients, or the relationships we cultivate with our community, it's all about creating a space where connection is at the core." Chef Gianna smiled, clearly impressed by his vision. "I love that, and I think we're aligned on that. I've spent so much of my career creating incredible dishes for people, but I want to be a part of something bigger, something that makes a difference. And that's what I see in your restaurant." Elon felt a sense of pride swell within him. They weren't just a restaurant. They were building something that mattered, a place where connection, authenticity, and shared experiences were the foundation. And now, they had someone like Chef Gianna Hart, whose name and influence could help amplify that mission. After hours of discussion about potential collaborations and ideas, they came to a consensus. Chef Gianna would come on board as an advisor and collaborator. She would bring her expertise to the kitchen, helping elevate the culinary experience while also providing guidance on how they could expand their reach and refine their brand. It wasn't just a win for the restaurant, it was a win for the entire mission. The collaboration wasn't about just adding a famous chef's name to their brand. It was about combining her expertise with their vision to create something truly unique. As the meeting concluded, Elon felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that this was the right step forward, but he also understood that maintaining the soul of the restaurant was essential. They had to keep their core values intact while embracing the opportunity to grow. Walking out of the meeting, Sarah turned to Elon. I think this is it. This is the next phase for us. Chef Gianna is going to help take us to new heights. Elon smiled, the excitement finally sinking in. It's going to be an incredible journey. But we're not losing sight of why we started this in the first place. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Elon felt confident in the direction they were heading. It wasn't just about building a business. It was about creating something that people could connect with on a deeper level. And with Chef Gianna by their side, they were poised to take their mission to new heights. The buzz around the collaboration with Chef Gianna Hart began spreading quickly. Local food critics, influencers, and loyal customers were all talking about the new partnership. Elon and Sarah were fielding calls daily, trying to keep up with the mounting interest. But amidst all the excitement, they knew that it was essential to keep their focus on the bigger picture. The values that had always guided them and the unique mission they had set out to accomplish. Elon had always believed in the power of innovation, but this was different. The restaurant wasn't just another business venture. It was a place that brought people together, creating memories over shared meals and meaningful conversations. And now, with Chef Gianna joining the team, they were about to push the boundaries of what they had built. But even with all the excitement, there was an underlying tension in the air. Elon had worked with the best minds in technology, but working in the world of food and hospitality was different. It wasn't about innovation in the traditional sense. It was about understanding people, their needs, and what they valued most when it came to food and dining experiences. It wasn't going to be an easy journey. The first major change came a few weeks later when Chef Gianna suggested they revamp the menu. While the restaurant had always prided itself on its comfort food and approachable dishes, Gianna believed that it was time to take things to the next level. She envisioned a menu that blended the familiar with the extraordinary, drawing from her own experiences in Michelin-starred kitchens, but still keeping the spirit of the restaurant intact. Elon, Sarah, I think it's time we elevate the dining experience, Chef Gianna said one afternoon, sitting at the head of the table in their now bustling kitchen. We've built a loyal customer base, and I think we've earned the right to experiment a little. I want to create a menu that tells a story, something that feels like a journey. Elon and Sarah exchanged glances, both intrigued but also a bit apprehensive. The restaurant had already gained a reputation for its cozy, neighborhood vibe. Would people be open to a more adventurous menu? It was a bold move, but then again, they had already proven that they could handle challenges. I'm open to it, Elon said thoughtfully, but I want to make sure that we don't lose the essence of what we've built. We can't forget where we started. Chef Gianna nodded, understanding the delicate balance they had to strike. Of course, the heart of the restaurant is about connection. We'll build the new menu around that. It'll still be about bringing people together over food, but we'll add new flavors, new experiences. The next few weeks were filled with tasting sessions, brainstorming meetings, and plenty of trial and error. Chef Gianna pushed the team to think outside the box, introducing new techniques and ingredients while still keeping the core elements of the restaurant intact. Some dishes were met with excitement, while others needed to be tweaked or scrapped entirely. But slowly, a new menu began to take shape. A menu that was both familiar and innovative, with dishes that felt like a celebration of flavor, craftsmanship, and community. Each dish had a story behind it, a narrative that reflected the restaurant's journey from its humble beginnings to its current success. As the new menu neared completion, Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had been through so much together. The reviews, the challenges, the unexpected twists, and now they were about to take their restaurant to new heights. But just as they were preparing for the grand unveiling of the new menu, another challenge arose. It started with a phone call from one of the restaurant's suppliers. There had been a shipping issue, and a large portion of their high-quality ingredients had been delayed. They were going to need to find a solution quickly, or they risked missing their scheduled launch date for the new menu. Elon's mind raced. He knew that finding a quick fix wouldn't be easy. They couldn't compromise on the quality of the food. They had built a reputation around using only the best ingredients. But at the same time, they couldn't afford to delay the launch. The pressure was on. He called Sarah into his office. "We've got a problem," he said, pacing. "The supplier's behind schedule, and we don't have enough of the ingredients we need to launch the new menu. What are our options?" Sarah thought for a moment. "We could reach out to other suppliers, but it might take too long. Or, we could scale back the menu for the first few weeks until we get the shipment in. Elon wasn't thrilled with either option. They had worked so hard on this new menu, and he didn't want to settle for anything less than perfect. But he knew they needed a solution, and fast. I think we should reach out to some local farms, Elon suggested. We've always talked about supporting local businesses, and this could be the perfect opportunity. We may not have every ingredient we originally planned for, but we can make adjustments, and it will still be incredible. Sarah nodded, clearly on board with the idea. That's a great idea. Let's get to work. Within hours, the team was in contact with local farms and vendors, scrambling to secure the ingredients they needed. It was a whirlwind of calls, emails, and negotiations, but soon enough, they had a plan in place. The new menu would launch on time, albeit with a few substitutions to ensure that the dishes still met the high standards they had set. The day of the launch arrived, and the restaurant was packed. Customers had been eagerly awaiting the new menu, and the energy in the air was palpable. Elon could feel the anticipation building, both from the staff and the customers. This was their moment. As the first plates of food were brought out to the tables, Elon watched the reactions of the customers. There were gasps of delight, murmurs of approval, and excited chatter as people tasted the new dishes. The blend of bold flavors and familiar comfort brought something new to the table, something that captured the essence of what they had always strived to create. By the end of the evening, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The restaurant had managed to pull off the launch without a hitch, even with the unexpected obstacles. It was a reminder that, even in the face of adversity, they were capable of overcoming challenges and staying true to their mission. As Elon stood at the bar that night, looking out over the full restaurant, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had faced another hurdle and come out stronger on the other side. And this time, it wasn't just about the food. It was about the connections they had built and the community they had created. "We did it," Sarah said, joining him at the bar with a smile. "It's official. The new menu's a success." Elon smiled back, feeling the weight of the moment. "We're not just building a restaurant. We're building something that lasts." And as the restaurant continued to thrive, Elon realized that the true success of their journey wasn't just in the food they served. It was in the relationships they had cultivated, the bonds they had formed, and the community they had created. A community that was growing stronger with every passing day. The new menu had proven to be a hit, but Elon wasn't content with simply maintaining the status quo. The launch had gone well, and the restaurant was thriving. But he knew there was more to do. The community they had built, the unique environment they had created, and the passion they had for their mission, it all deserved to be shared with the world. The next step was clear: expansion. Elon had always prided himself on his ability to think big, to push beyond limits, to go where no one thought he could go. It wasn't just about building a business. It was about creating a movement, one that would challenge the way people experienced food and community. And he knew that the restaurant had the potential to grow beyond its current location. It wasn't going to be easy. Scaling a restaurant business was an entirely different challenge than running a single location. But Elon felt confident. The vision had always been about more than just the food. It was about fostering a culture of connection, of bringing people together in a meaningful way. And that message could resonate anywhere, not just in their hometown. The first person he called about the idea was Sarah. "I think it's time," Elon said, pacing in his office. "We've got something special here, Sarah, and I think it's time to take it beyond these walls." Sarah was silent for a moment. She had known Elon for years and had been through the ups and downs with him, so she understood his drive. But she also knew that this was a huge decision. "You're talking about opening new locations?" she asked, her voice cautious. "I am," Elon said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I think we're ready. We've built something that people believe in. We've got the right people, the right message, and the right momentum. Let's take it to the next level." Sarah thought for a moment, her mind racing. It was a big step, but Elon had always been one to think big. She knew the risks, but she also knew the potential. If anyone could pull this off, it was them. "I agree," Sarah said finally, "but we can't lose what makes us special. We've got to stay true to the mission, no matter how big we get. We need to make sure that the experience we're offering is the same in every location." Elon smiled, feeling a sense of relief. Sarah had always been his grounding force, the person who kept him focused on what mattered most. "Of course," he said, "we'll make sure of that. It's about connection, community, and quality. Those are the things that will never change." They spent the next few weeks planning the expansion. The first step was finding the right location for the new restaurant. Elon knew that it had to be a place where the community would embrace what they were trying to do. It wasn't just about the space, it was about the people. They needed a city that valued authenticity, creativity, and connection. After researching several cities, they decided on Austin, Texas. It was a vibrant, growing city with a strong food culture and a focus on local, sustainable businesses. Elon and Sarah both felt that it was the perfect fit. The next challenge was assembling the right team to make it happen. As the plans for Austin began to take shape, Elon found himself in an unfamiliar role. In his past ventures, he had been at the helm of the creative and technological aspects of the business. Now, he was managing an entire team of people, designers, contractors, chefs, and business consultants, each with their own expertise and ideas. It was a delicate balancing act, but with Chef Gianna's guidance, the process was moving forward. "I've always believed that a restaurant is a reflection of the people who create it," Chef Gianna said during one of their strategy sessions. "And we've got a great team. We need to make sure that Austin gets the same vibe, the same heart that this place has." "That's non-negotiable," Elon agreed, but he knew it wasn't just about replicating what they had. It was about creating an experience that felt just as special, just as connected, in a new location. He wanted the new restaurant to feel like an extension of their original vision, a place where people could come together and make memories, no matter where they were. As the months passed, the team worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. The design of the new space in Austin was carefully thought out. An open kitchen, warm lighting, community tables, and cozy booths, all designed to make people feel at home. They focused on sourcing local ingredients, collaborating with nearby farms and food artisans to stay true to their commitment to sustainability and quality. When the day came to open the doors to their Austin location, Elon felt a rush of emotions. This wasn't just a new chapter for the business. It was a reflection of everything they had worked for. It was a testament to the power of connection, authenticity, and community. And it was a chance to create a space where even more people could come together and share in the experience they had built. The opening night was a whirlwind. Elon and Sarah greeted the guests, shaking hands and thanking them for their support. The buzz around the new location had been building for weeks, and the turnout was impressive. The team worked seamlessly, bringing out plate after plate of delicious food that represented the heart of the restaurant. It felt like a celebration, not just of the food, but of everything they had accomplished. As the night drew to a close, Elon stood at the bar, looking out at the full restaurant. The energy was electric. People were laughing, talking, and enjoying their meals. It was everything he had hoped for, and more. This was the moment when it all felt real. They were no longer just a small, local restaurant. They were a movement. "I think we did it," Sarah said, walking up beside him. Elon nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Yeah, I think we did." But as he looked around, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held. They had come so far, but there was still so much more to do. The Austin location was just the beginning. He had big dreams, dreams of expanding to other cities, of creating a brand that resonated with people everywhere. But as he stood there, surrounded by the laughter and joy of people enjoying the food, he knew that the key to their success was staying true to their mission. It wasn't just about growth, it was about connection. And as long as they kept that at the heart of everything they did, Elon knew that there was no limit to what they could achieve. The Austin opening was a success, but Elon knew that the real work had just begun. Growing a business meant far more than just opening new locations. There were long-term challenges that would test every part of their business model: logistics, staffing, consistency, customer loyalty, and maintaining the spirit of the restaurant that had drawn people in from the start. Scaling could quickly become overwhelming, and Elon wasn't about to let that happen. He and Sarah returned to Austin a week after the opening, checking in on everything. The staff had settled into the rhythm of things, and the restaurant was packed as usual. But as they walked through the bustling dining area, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that there was something missing. "Everything looks great, doesn't it?" Sarah remarked, noticing Elon's distant look. "I mean, we're doing it. We're really doing it." Elon turned to her with a smile but couldn't fully share her enthusiasm. "It's great, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface. We need more than just a great product. We need consistency across every location. We need to make sure the experience is the same, whether you're in Austin, here, or wherever else we expand next." Sarah nodded in agreement. The new location had quickly built a strong base of customers, but there were always growing pains that came with expansion. The challenge was maintaining the same level of intimacy and community that had made their first restaurant so beloved. They spent the next few days in Austin, meeting with the team, discussing feedback, and making sure the restaurant was living up to the vision they had. After all, it was not just about opening a second location. It was about replicating the magic they had in their first restaurant. Every plate of food, every interaction with customers, every detail of the experience had to feel like an extension of what they'd built from the very beginning. As Elon stood in the kitchen watching the staff prepare meals, he realized that it wasn't just about what was on the plate. It was about the connection each team member had to the values of the restaurant. The chefs, the waitstaff, even the dishwashers, all of them were part of the experience. They had to understand and embrace the heart of the mission, not just follow orders. "We're creating something bigger than just a business," he said to Sarah, his voice reflective. "This is about making sure everyone, from the kitchen to the dining room, feels like they're part of something that matters." Sarah looked at him, her eyes full of understanding. "It's the culture. We can't forget that. This isn't just a restaurant, it's a movement. We need to continue leading with that mindset." The realization felt like a turning point. Elon knew that in order to scale successfully, they had to ensure the culture was embedded in every new location from day one. They couldn't just hire people based on skills. They had to hire people who shared their passion for community, creativity, and connection. Everyone had to be a part of the same story. Elon and Sarah spent the rest of the week making plans for the future. It wasn't just about opening more restaurants. It was about creating a foundation of consistency and quality. They needed to establish systems that would ensure each new location would uphold the values of their original spot. They worked with Chef Gianna to create standardized recipes that would ensure the same flavors, the same experience, no matter where customers dined. They brought in consultants to help streamline operations, creating processes that could be replicated in any new location. And most importantly, they set aside time to continually check in with their teams, ensuring that the core values of the business were always top of mind. As the weeks passed, the team at the Austin restaurant grew more and more cohesive. They were no longer just employees. They were family, working together toward a shared goal. The energy in the restaurant was palpable, and it felt like the connection they had fostered was spreading to every corner of the dining room. But just as things were starting to feel steady, a new challenge emerged. The restaurant industry was notoriously competitive, and the growing success of Elon's restaurants had caught the attention of larger, more established players in the industry. Elon received an unexpected phone call one afternoon. "Mr. Musk," a deep voice said on the other end of the line. "This is Robert Shields from Shield Dining Group. I've been keeping an eye on your restaurant's success, and I think it's time we talk about a potential partnership." Elon listened carefully, curious but cautious. Robert's reputation preceded him. He was the head of a conglomerate that owned a wide range of successful restaurants, many of which were known for their aggressive business strategies and expansion models. "I'm not sure what you mean by a partnership," Elon replied, his tone measured. "We've built this business on our own terms, and we're focused on staying true to our values." "I understand that," Robert responded smoothly. "But as you scale, you'll need resources, and we can provide them. We have access to capital, operational expertise, and the infrastructure to help you take your business to the next level." Elon paused, his mind racing. The idea of partnering with a larger company had its appeal: resources, more locations, faster expansion, but it also meant losing control. It meant giving up part of the creative freedom that had made the restaurant what it was. "I'll need some time to think it over," Elon said, finally, "but I appreciate you reaching out." As he hung up the phone, Elon felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had always prided himself on forging his own path, but the pressure to scale quickly was mounting. There was no denying that the right partnership could help them grow faster, but it would come at a cost. Was it worth it? He shared the conversation with Sarah later that evening, and the two of them discussed the pros and cons for hours. The opportunity was tempting, but they both knew that it wasn't just about financial growth. They had to stay true to their mission, their values, and their customers. They couldn't let anyone dictate the direction of their restaurant, not even someone as powerful as Robert Shields. "Do we want to go down that road?" Sarah asked, her voice quiet but firm. "Or do we want to keep building this our way, with the people who believe in what we're doing?" Elon took a deep breath, looking out at the city of Austin through the restaurant's windows. The bustling streets, the vibrant culture. It reminded him of why they started all this in the first place. It was about connection. It was about community. And that was something that couldn't be bought or traded away. "We do it our way," Elon said, his voice resolute. "We've come this far without compromising, and I believe we can continue to grow while staying true to who we are." The decision was made. They would continue to grow, but they would do it on their own terms, with their own values at the forefront. It was a long road ahead, but Elon was more certain than ever that resilience, authenticity, and passion would lead the way. The decision to go it alone was made, but it didn't come without its challenges. Elon had always believed in the power of perseverance and the strength of a mission rooted in authenticity. Yet, the road ahead was fraught with obstacles that tested every aspect of his leadership. The growth was exhilarating, but scaling a business was like trying to keep a house of cards from toppling over in a stiff breeze. The restaurant had seen a steady stream of customers, and the feedback from the new location in Austin was overwhelmingly positive. But the pressure of maintaining that success, while continuing to expand, was beginning to weigh heavily on Elon's shoulders. "Have you seen this?" Sarah said, walking into Elon's office, holding her phone. She handed it over to him, and he read the article aloud. It was about their Austin location, praising the food and the overall atmosphere, but also pointing out that there were occasional delays in service due to a shortage of staff. It was minor, but the feedback was clear. Perfect food wasn't enough without perfect service. "That's the price of growth," Elon muttered, setting the phone down. "We have to maintain quality, but now we're adding another layer of complexity. Managing these locations, it's becoming a full-time job just dealing with the hiccups." Sarah sat down across from him. "We knew it would be tough. But we're not in this alone, Elon. We have the team. We just have to trust them more. Delegate." It was easier said than done. Elon had always been a hands-on leader, involved in every aspect of the business, from the food menu to customer interaction. Letting go of control was difficult, but he knew Sarah was right. They couldn't do everything themselves. The vision was bigger than any one person. "We have to expand our leadership team," Elon said, rubbing his temples. "We need people who can lead these locations while we focus on the big picture." Sarah nodded, already working on a list of potential candidates for managerial positions. The key, Elon knew, was finding individuals who shared their passion for the mission, the ones who understood what made their restaurant stand out. It wasn't just about running a business. It was about creating an experience that resonated with every person who walked through their doors. The next few months were a whirlwind. They began recruiting new managers and strengthening the operational team. The training process was rigorous, designed not only to teach people the mechanics of running a restaurant, but also to instill the company's culture and mission. It was about finding people who would champion the experience, making it a reflection of their original vision. As they worked through the hiring process, the next obstacle appeared: the supply chain. "Have you heard from the farm about the seasonal ingredients?" Sarah asked one afternoon as she reviewed the inventory report. "Some of the ingredients we use are getting harder to source." Elon's face tightened. He had always prided himself on sourcing locally, supporting small farms and food artisans who shared his values. But the rapid expansion meant that the demand for ingredients had skyrocketed. The supply chains weren't designed to handle such large orders, and Elon didn't want to compromise the quality of their food just to meet demand. He spent the next few days on the phone with their suppliers, working on contingency plans to ensure that they could still source the high-quality ingredients that were at the heart of their menu. It was a delicate balancing act, maintaining the integrity of their offerings without sacrificing taste or sustainability. Elon knew that if the quality of the food slipped, so would the essence of the restaurant. But as they worked through the logistics, a bigger challenge loomed on the horizon. The food industry was growing more competitive by the day. Larger chains were beginning to take notice of Elon's success, and they weren't shy about expanding into new markets, often using their financial clout to undercut smaller businesses like his. One evening, as Elon sat in his office, poring over numbers and supplier contracts, a new email popped up in his inbox. It was from Robert Shields, the man who had reached out months ago with the potential partnership offer. Elon, I'm writing to follow up on our conversation about a partnership. I understand you've decided to continue on your own path, and I respect that. However, I think you'll find that the market is becoming increasingly challenging. We've seen your growth, and I believe you're facing some serious competition ahead. Let's talk again soon, and maybe we can help you navigate this next phase. Best, Robert. Elon stared at the email, the words echoing in his mind. Competition wasn't new to him. He had faced down massive odds before. But something about the timing of this email, the hint of a looming threat, left a sour taste in his mouth. He didn't need a partnership. What he needed was to prove that they could stand on their own, that they could thrive without compromising their vision. He forwarded the email to Sarah, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as he debated his next move. He wasn't about to let anyone push them into a partnership for the sake of convenience. But he also knew that the game was changing, and they had to stay ahead of the curve. I'll call him, Elon finally typed in a response, but on my terms. 2 days later, Elon found himself in a conference room, sitting across from Robert Shields. The man was impeccably dressed, his confident demeanor at odds with the tension that had begun to settle in the room. Glad we could finally meet, Robert said, settling into his seat. I've been following your business closely, and I have to say, I'm impressed. But you're at a crossroads. Expanding at this pace is going to take resources, and we have those resources. We could help you scale even faster. Elon leaned forward, locking eyes with Robert. I appreciate your offer, but I don't think we're looking for that kind of help right now. We're focused on building something sustainable, something that reflects who we are. Robert raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting such a direct answer. Are you sure about that? Because I've seen restaurants with your kind of potential falter when the competition catches up. It's a tough market out there. Elon stood up, his voice calm but firm. I've been in tough markets before, and we're not faltering. We're building something real, something that will last. If you can't see that, then we're probably not a good fit for a partnership. There was a moment of silence before Robert smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. You're making a mistake, Musk, but I respect your decision. As Robert left the room, Elon let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. It felt like a weight had been lifted, but the road ahead was still uncertain. There would always be competition, always be challenges. But in that moment, Elon knew that as long as they stayed true to their values, they could overcome whatever came their way. The challenges of maintaining quality while scaling a business were starting to feel more like a burden than a battle. Despite the progress they'd made, Elon and his team found themselves constantly putting out fires, staff shortages, supplier issues, and the growing competition from established restaurant giants. Every day felt like another test of their resolve, and Elon could feel the pressure mounting, especially as he and Sarah worked tirelessly to balance the demands of running multiple locations with the creative vision they had for the restaurant. It wasn't just the logistics that were wearing on him. It was the emotional toll. The dream that he and Sarah had built together was growing, but with growth came isolation. Elon had always been a visionary, but now he found himself missing the intimate, creative environment of their first restaurant. The camaraderie of working side by side with his team, the late-night brainstorming sessions with Sarah, they were all fading into the background as the business expanded. I think we need a break, Sarah said one evening, breaking the silence between them as they sat in the office late into the night. The restaurant had just closed, and the buzz of customers had died down, leaving behind the steady hum of kitchen equipment and the occasional clinking of dishes. Elon glanced up from the stack of paperwork on his desk. What do you mean? A real break? From the grind? She said, leaning back in her chair, her voice tinged with exhaustion. We're getting lost in the day-to-day. We're not making time to be creative anymore. And I think that's taking a toll on everything. Elon rubbed his temples. I don't know if I can afford to take a break right now. There's so much riding on this. The competition's getting fiercer by the day, and we have to stay ahead. I'm not sure we can afford to slow down. Sarah's expression softened, her eyes understanding. I get it, but if we burn out, we won't have anything left to give. We can't lose sight of why we started this in the first place. It was never just about growing a business. It was about creating something meaningful. And to keep that alive, we need to nurture it, not just keep running after it. Elon sat quietly, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always prided himself on his ability to push forward, no matter the cost. But lately, he'd felt the strain. The early days of their restaurant, when it was just him, Sarah, and a small but passionate team, seemed like a distant memory. They had created something magical back then, but now, it was hard to remember what that magic even felt like. You're right, he said finally, letting out a deep breath. We've been so focused on surviving that we haven't been focused on thriving. I don't want to lose what we've built. Sarah smiled, reaching across the desk to squeeze his hand. We won't lose it, but we have to remember why we're doing this and make time for what matters most. The next day, Elon and Sarah made a decision. They would take a weekend off, just the two of them. They needed to step away from the business, even if just for a few days, to reconnect with the passion that had started it all. It was a chance to recharge, to breathe, and to refocus. They booked a small cabin in the Texas Hill Country, far enough from the hustle of Austin to be immersed in nature. It was a simple getaway, with no phones, no work emails, just a quiet escape where they could relax and reset. The weekend was exactly what they needed. They spent their days hiking, talking about their future, and reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. They laughed, reminisced about their early struggles, and talked about their dreams for the restaurant. By the time they left, they both felt more centered, more in tune with their vision. But the break wasn't just a chance to rest. It was a reminder of why they had started this journey in the first place. They wanted to create a space where people could gather, share stories, and enjoy incredible food. The connection they had with their team and their customers was at the heart of everything, and that was what had made their restaurant so successful in the first place. When they returned to Austin, it was with renewed energy and a clearer sense of purpose. They had made some tough decisions in the past few months, but now they knew it was time to refocus on what truly mattered. The experience they were providing, not just the business side of things. Elon and Sarah spent the next few weeks revisiting their core values. They gathered their team and held meetings to re-energize everyone about the restaurant's mission. The staff was more than just employees. They were the ambassadors of the experience. It was time to reignite the culture that had made their restaurant feel special in the first place. In the kitchen, Chef Gianna worked with the team to refine the menu, ensuring that each dish was a reflection of the restaurant's mission: fresh, local, and sustainable. They brought in more local farmers and food producers, strengthening the connections with the community that had supported them from the beginning. In the dining room, the team focused on perfecting the customer experience. It wasn't enough to have great food. They had to make every guest feel like they were part of something bigger. It wasn't about turning tables quickly. It was about creating an atmosphere of warmth, care, and connection. They wanted every person who walked through the door to feel like family. The changes were small, but they were meaningful. And soon, the restaurant felt like it had regained its spark. The energy was palpable. People were coming in not just for the food, but for the experience. They were drawn in by the sense of community and the genuine passion that the team had for what they were doing. But just as things were beginning to feel balanced, another challenge emerged. It started with a subtle shift. The reviews online had been glowing, until they weren't. A few dissatisfied customers had left negative comments on social media, and before they knew it, a small but vocal group began to criticize the restaurant's prices and wait times. It was nothing they hadn't faced before, but this time it felt different. The complaints were more organized, and there was a sense of momentum behind them. Elon and Sarah knew they had to address it head-on. They couldn't afford to let negative feedback snowball. It wasn't about defending themselves. It was about listening, understanding, and making sure their customers knew they were valued. We need to respond, but we need to do it with transparency, Elon said to Sarah, as they sat down together, reading through the feedback. We're growing, and sometimes there will be hiccups. But we can't hide from that. Sarah nodded. It's not just about defending the business. It's about showing people we care. We need to share the story behind the restaurant, the struggles, the values. People connect with that. They crafted a response, acknowledging the issues and offering solutions. They reminded their customers that they were a small, independent restaurant, doing their best to grow without compromising on quality. They promised to continue listening and improving. It wasn't an easy decision to put themselves out there so publicly, but it was necessary. The road to success had never been easy, and they had to prove once again that they were willing to face challenges head-on, no matter how difficult it seemed. It wasn't long before the storm of negative feedback began to subside. Elon and Sarah's transparent response, along with the changes they implemented, began to show results. Customers who had been on the fence about the restaurant now felt like they had a personal stake in its success. They appreciated the honesty, the effort, and the commitment to quality that the restaurant had always embodied. It was a reminder of something Elon had known all along. People wanted to feel connected to the businesses they supported. They didn't just want a meal. They wanted to know that their patronage was making a difference. By acknowledging their mistakes and showing their commitment to improvement, Elon and Sarah had turned the tide. "Look at this," Sarah said one morning, showing Elon her phone. It was a post from a local food critic, someone who had once been skeptical about their ability to sustain growth. "I've been following this restaurant's journey closely, and I have to say, there's something different happening here. The recent challenges haven't made them retreat. They've made them stronger. And that's why I'm not just recommending this place anymore. I'm rooting for it." Elon couldn't help but smile. The praise wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about their story, the resilience, the authenticity, the way they had faced adversity and turned it into a source of strength. Their vision was starting to resonate with people on a deeper level. As the days passed, the restaurant's reputation began to strengthen. The team was in sync, and the energy in the restaurant was electric. The tension that had once loomed over them had lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. They were back on track, but there was still a lot of work to do. One evening, as Elon walked through the bustling dining room, he was struck by the hum of conversation and the laughter that filled the space. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was a community, a place where people felt like they belonged. And for the first time in months, Elon realized that this was exactly what he had always wanted to create. "Excuse me, Elon?" Elon turned to see one of the servers standing beside him. "Yeah, what's up?" "There's a couple here. They're celebrating an anniversary. They wanted to personally thank you for the experience tonight. They said they felt like part of something bigger, like family." Elon smiled, a warmth spreading through him. "That's exactly what we're going for. Let's make sure their dessert is on the house tonight." The server nodded, and as she walked away, Elon watched her disappear into the crowd. He felt a deep sense of pride. They had made it through the toughest part, and now the restaurant was exactly what he had always envisioned. A place where people could come together, share stories, and enjoy great food in a space that felt like home. But even with all the success, Elon knew that challenges would always come. Growth wasn't just about expanding the physical locations, it was about expanding their impact. They had to continue evolving, continue pushing forward, even when things were going well. One evening, Elon found himself in his office, going over projections for the next year. There was still much to do. New locations to open, more communities to serve, and a constant need to innovate and improve. But he had an overwhelming sense of clarity that hadn't been there before. He wasn't just focused on surviving anymore. He was focused on thriving. He glanced at his phone, where an email from Sarah popped up. "Hey, Elon, we need to talk about the next big step. I've been thinking about the direction we want to go in, and I think it's time we take a leap. Let's discuss tomorrow. Dinner at 7? Elon felt a spark of curiosity. Sarah had always been the one to challenge him to think bigger, to dream further. Whatever she had in mind, he was ready for it. He quickly replied, looking forward to it. The next evening, Elon and Sarah sat down at their favorite table in the restaurant. The place was buzzing with energy, but it was quieter here, tucked away in a corner where they could have a real conversation without distractions. "So, what's on your mind?" Elon asked as they sipped their wine. Sarah set down her glass and leaned in. I've been thinking a lot about the future. We've made it through the hardest part, but we can't stop here. We're sitting on something that could change the industry. We've built a brand that's rooted in authenticity, community, and quality. And I think we have an opportunity to scale that, to not just open more restaurants, but to create something even bigger. Something that could influence the way people think about food, community, and sustainability. Elon listened carefully, his mind already racing with possibilities. You're thinking bigger than just more locations, aren't you? Sarah smiled. Exactly. We have the opportunity to start a movement. What if we could create a network of restaurants, farmers, and food artisans that work together to create a model for sustainability? What if we could become a platform for other small businesses in the food industry to thrive? Elon's eyes lit up. He had always been passionate about innovation, but this was a new level of ambition. You're talking about more than just a restaurant chain. You're talking about changing the way the food system works. Yes, Sarah said, her voice full of conviction. We're not just feeding people, we're feeding an idea that food doesn't have to come from corporate giants. It can come from small, local businesses that care about quality and community. We could be the catalyst for something much bigger than ourselves. Elon leaned back in his chair, taking it all in. For the first time in a long time, he felt a deep sense of excitement about the future. This was more than just running a restaurant. It was about creating a legacy, a movement that could impact the food industry on a global scale. I'm in, Elon said, his voice steady. Let's make this happen. And with that, they began to chart the course for the next chapter of their journey, one that would change not just their restaurant, but the entire food ecosystem. The challenges ahead were daunting, but Elon knew that together, they could build something that would outlast them all. As Elon and Sarah stood at the threshold of their most ambitious project yet, the weight of their decision began to settle in. What had started as a single restaurant born from a shared dream was now evolving into something that could influence the entire food industry. They were no longer just restaurateurs, they were visionaries, and they knew the road ahead would be as challenging as it was exciting. The next few months were a whirlwind of planning, meetings, and sleepless nights. Elon and Sarah worked side by side, constantly refining their ideas and expanding their network. They reached out to local farmers, food artisans, and sustainability advocates, gathering a community of like-minded people who shared their passion for food that was both delicious and responsible. The plan was clear. They would create a platform, a network of small, sustainable food businesses that could operate in harmony with each other, supporting local agriculture and reducing environmental impact. They envisioned a food system where the focus wasn't on mass production, but on quality, community, and sustainability. They began by opening a new restaurant, not just as another location, but as a prototype for what the future could look like. The new space was designed to be a hub for collaboration. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was a space where local farmers could showcase their produce, where other food entrepreneurs could come to learn and share resources. The design was open and transparent, with large windows showing the kitchen, so diners could watch the chef's work. Everything about the space was meant to encourage a sense of connection, not just between the food and the people, but between the people themselves. Elon couldn't help but feel a surge of pride every time he walked through the doors. The restaurant had become a symbol of what they were trying to achieve. But the real test would be whether or not this model could be replicated. Could it work on a larger scale? As the project took off, Elon and Sarah began receiving invitations to speak at food sustainability conferences, participate in panels, and share their journey with others. They quickly became recognized as leaders in the movement to reshape the food industry. Yet, with all the newfound attention, Elon knew they couldn't afford to lose sight of their original mission. "This is bigger than just us," Elon said one evening as he and Sarah sat in the now familiar corner of their restaurant. The place was packed, the sounds of laughter and conversation filling the air. But Elon couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger. Sarah nodded, her eyes focused on the busy dining room. "It's bigger than us, and it's bigger than the restaurant. We're creating a space for other small businesses to thrive, a place where they don't have to compete with the corporate giants, a place where quality and community are the priority." "But we can't do it alone," Elon said, his mind racing. "We need more people. We need to build a coalition." That night, after the restaurant closed, Elon and Sarah stayed late, brainstorming and working through ideas. They began drafting plans for the platform, building out a network of partners, from food producers to local farmers and sustainability advocates. They envisioned an ecosystem where each member had a role to play, supporting one another and working together toward a shared goal. Sarah looked up from her laptop after several hours. "You know, this could change everything." Elon smiled, though his eyes reflected the weight of their vision. "I think it already is." By the time they had finalized their plans for the first official gathering of their new food network, Elon and Sarah were both exhausted and exhilarated. They had planned a summit, inviting food entrepreneurs, local farmers, and industry experts to come together and discuss the future of sustainable food. It would be a chance for them to showcase what they had created and build even more connections that would help propel their movement forward. The day of the summit arrived, and it was more successful than they had anticipated. The event was packed with like-minded individuals, all eager to share their experiences, ideas, and dreams for a better food system. There were workshops on sustainability, talks on local sourcing, and roundtable discussions about how to scale businesses without compromising values. It was a space for collaboration, not competition, and Elon could see the energy that was building among the crowd. As Elon stood on the stage, addressing the room, he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. This was the culmination of everything they had worked for. The impact they had always hoped to make was finally coming to life. He looked around the room at the people who had joined them on this journey, the community they had built, and realized that they were all united by one thing: the belief that food could be more than just a commodity, it could be a force for change. "We're not just changing the way people eat," Elon said, his voice steady but passionate. "We're changing the way people think about food, about where it comes from, who grows it, and how it gets to the table. We're creating a movement that celebrates sustainability, community, and quality, and we're just getting started." The room erupted into applause, and for a moment, Elon could feel the weight of the world lift off his shoulders. It wasn't about the success of the restaurant anymore. It was about the legacy they were building. This movement wasn't just about food. It was about reshaping the way people thought about the world, one meal at a time. As the summit came to a close, Elon and Sarah found themselves standing outside, watching the sunset over the city. The restaurant was quiet now, the buzz of the day finally fading into the evening stillness. "It's happening," Sarah said softly, her voice full of awe. Elon nodded, his eyes filled with pride and determination. "We've only just begun." And as they stood there, together, watching the sky shift from hues of orange to purple, Elon knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had already created something powerful, something that would change the world for the better. The road wouldn't always be easy, but with each step, they were moving closer to their vision. A world where food brought people together, where sustainability wasn't just a trend, but a way of life. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long time, Elon felt ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?